Chapter 45-45. In the face of Mu Zhaoquan's Orochi real form, Hua Qiqiong was only slightly surprised. He did not panic at all. "Lord Hua, I admit that you're extremely powerful, but don't you think you're a little too confident?" Mu Zhaoquan's eyes were extremely gloomy. The Orochi real form outside his body swayed slightly, and the surrounding void trembled violently. It was as if its every move could overturn heaven and earth. Such a terrifying power was indeed rare in the world. "Come on." Hua Qiqiong smiled faintly, still full of confidence. "You're courting death." Mu Zhaoquan's eyes were vicious. Hua Qiqiong's nonchalant expression had completely infuriated him. Boom! In the next instant, the Orochi real form moved, and the surrounding heaven and earth shook. The gigantic serpent's body rolled out, bringing with it the power to destroy everything as it pressed down on Hua Qiqiong. Hua Qiqiong could not help but frown as he felt the terrifying pressure. Under the pressure of this terrifying pressure, the space around him seemed to have been sealed, making it impossible for him to dodge. "Looks like I've underestimated the Orochi real form." Hua Qiqiong did not panic at all. He only smiled bitterly and waved a long sword in his hand. Several agile sword essences gushed out, and the sharp chi tore through the void and headed straight for the Orochi. Boom! Then a muffled sound exploded in the void. Hua Qiqiong's body was forced back hundreds of meters, and he could not even stand straight from the forceful impact. Everyone looked at the scene in the sky and could not help but gasp in unison. Their expressions were one of disbelief. No one expected Mu Zhaoquan's strength to be so powerful. However, in the next moment, everyone saw that there were several sword marks on the head of the Orochi, making it look even more ferocious. It turned out that Hua Qiqiong had also injured Mu Zhaoquan's Orochi real form. However, the Orochi's aura did not diminish at all. In fact, it increased by quite a bit, and the huge serpent's body pounced over again. Sword essences gushed out from Hua Qiqiong's body, breaking through the void. He moved like lightning and avoided the direct impact. But the aftermath of the huge serpent's body in the void still caused a great impact on him, causing him to lose his balance in the air. Swoosh! At this moment, a sharp sword energy whistled through the air. Before Hua Qiqiong could react, it left a horrifying bloody wound on his left shoulder. Instantly, blood gushed out like a fountain and dyed half of his body red. "It's over." Upon seeing this, Mu Zhaoquan let out a low roar. The Yamata no Orochi's speed instantly increased by several times, as if it had grown a pair of wings. Compared to its huge body, it was already inconceivably fast, and directly pounced towards Hua Qiqiong. The bloody mouth was like a black hole, as if it wanted to devour and annihilate everything. "Be careful." When the surrounding people saw this scene, they subconsciously exclaimed. Their nerves were stretched taut, and even their breathing seemed to have stopped. The power of the Yamata no Orochi was extremely powerful. If this attack landed, Hua Qiqiong would not be able to dodge it. Even if he did not die, he would be gravely injured. Nie Tian and Guling Wuji were even more nervous to the extreme. They only felt that every part of their body was tensed up, and their blood was surging nonstop. At this moment, Hua Qiqiong merely furrowed his brows. Then he held the long sword in his hand vertically in front of him and drew a line on the blade with his finger. A five-colored ray of light appeared and instantly enveloped his entire body. Then, like a Buddhist lotus, it rapidly bloomed. The five-color ray of light emitted halos and ripples spread out. 1 turned into 10, 10 turned into 100, 100 turned into 1,000, and 1,000 turned into 10,000. It seemed to be endless. Rumble. At this moment, the Yamata no Orochi descended, but its huge body was blocked by the five-colored ray of light. A tearing sound came from the void, followed by a terrifying squeezing sound. The Yamata no Orochi's strength could shake the heavens, but under the five-colored ray of light, it could not advance even an inch. How is this possible? Mu Zhaoquan was stunned by the scene in front of him and immediately shouted. He could not believe his eyes. Hua Qiqiong actually used the seemingly insignificant five-colored ray of light to directly block the Yamada no Orochi's attack. What was that five-colored ray of light? What kind of power did it contain? How could it possibly block the Yamada no Orochi? Venerable Orochi, if you think that the power of the Yamada no Orochi is invincible, then you are underestimating the people of the world. Hua Qiqiong took a step forward, and his figure soared into the sky like a long rainbow, forcing the Yamada no Orochi to retreat. Outside his body, the five-colored ray of light was constantly changing, like the auspicious clouds, unpredictable and unpredictable. The five-color ray of light was extremely mysterious. It seemed soft and gentle, but it contained a terrifying power. What kind of power is this? Mu Xiaoquan was indeed an expert who had experienced hundreds of battles. He quickly calmed down and asked coldly. His eyes darkened. Five virtues holy light. Hua Qiqiong smiled faintly, and his aura rose again. His body shone with the five-colored ray of light, and a lotus flower opened the sky. Space-time cracks appeared in the void, and a violent space-time storm rushed out, causing the entire evil flow, forbidden boundary, to tremble and show signs of collapse. This, Mu Xiaoquan clearly did not expect Hua Qiqiong to be so powerful. His pupils shrank involuntarily, and he was momentarily speechless. Venerable Orochi, you and I are both from the Ghost Clan, and I was friend with the previous Venerable Orochi. How about you surrender now, and this battle will end here? Hua Qiqiong's eyes darkened as he spoke in a loud voice. He was like a deity descending to the mortal world, majestic and unassailable. Venerable Hua, aren't you underestimating me too much by asking me to surrender? Mu Xiaoquan's eyes turned cold as if he had made up his mind about something. He said coldly, "Do you think the power of the Yamada no Orochi is limited to this?" Hua Qiqiong frowned. He immediately realized something and asked in shock, "What are you trying to do? I'll let you witness the true power of the Yamada no Orochi." Mu Xiaoquan's eyes were cold and murderous. As soon as he finished speaking, his body suddenly shook, and blood qi gushed out from his body. The bloody aura filled the sky, and the surrounding void trembled continuously. "Are you crazy?" Hua Qiqiong suddenly understood something. He growled and instinctively retreated. He never thought that Mu Xiaoquan would burn the power of his bloodline to activate the power of the Yamada no Orochi for this battle. From Hua Qiqiong's point of view, this was just a battle. The outcome was not important, so why would he fight with his life on the line? Unfortunately, Mu Xiaoquan did not think so. Rumble. As Mu Xiaoquan released his blood qi, the void rumbled endlessly. The heaven and earth shook as if the end of the world had arrived. And at this moment, an incomparably strange scene happened. Under the watchful eyes of countless people, the head of the Yamada no Orochi shook slightly and grew a second head. Everyone was dumbfounded by this scene. They stared blankly at the sky, and the shock in their hearts was written all over their faces. Then, an even stranger scene appeared. After the Yamada no Orochi grew two heads, it changed again. 2 became 4, 4 became 8, and a total of 8 snake heads were born. This was the original appearance of the Yamada no Orochi, 8 heads devouring the sky. Chapter 45-46. High up in the sky, Orochi revealed its original appearance. Its 8 mountain-like heads roared and swallowed the wind and thunder. It was extremely violent, and its momentum could shake the heavens. Everyone stared blankly at the scene in the sky. The shock they felt was indescribable. No one had expected Mu Xiaoquan's power to be so terrifying. His aura was comparable to that of a true pinnacle existence in the heavens. However, in the face of the complete body of Yamada no Orochi, Hua Qiqiong merely furrowed his brows and did not show any signs of fear. Until this moment, he still had absolute confidence. "I didn't expect you to be able to condense the complete form of Orochi. I have to admit that your current strength has already surpassed the previous Lord of Orochi." Hua Qiqiong frowned slightly and said in an indifferent tone, "However, although your Orochi is complete, it only has the form but not the spirit. It's rare for Lord Hua to still be so confident even at this moment." Mu Xiaoquan's eyes were bloodshot. Hua Qiqiong's calm demeanor made him feel as if there was a fishbone stuck in his throat. He could not swallow it nor spit it out, and it was very uncomfortable. However, all of this was about to end. He absolutely did not believe that Hua Qiqiong could fight against the complete form of Orochi. Although Hua Qiqiong was right that Mu Xiaoquan's Orochi had the form, it could not unleash its true power. However, Mu Xiaoquan believed that Orochi was extremely powerful. Even in this form, it was not something that Hua Qiqiong could fight against. Then bring it on. Hua Qiqiong's expression was still indifferent. The corner of his mouth twitched slightly, and the five-colored light around him changed slightly. It vaguely took on a misty state, and it looked a little strange. "As you wish," Mu Xiaoquan said in a low voice. Without hesitation, he took a step forward, and the Orochi's true form tumbled down from the void. The enormous power set off waves that were tens of thousands of feet high, and the heavens and earth wailed under the pressure. At this moment, a terrifying shock wave spread out in all directions. The surrounding people felt the powerful aura in the void and used their strength to resist it. The few peaks of the Fontian sect nearby could not withstand the force and shook violently as if they were about to collapse. Fortunately, with the suppression of the Heaven Beacon Stone statue, the mountain gate could still be stabilized. However, some of the peaks of the Heaven Beacon Mountain range in the distance were unable to withstand the terrifying power without the protection of the Heaven Beacon statues and formations. For a moment, it was as if the heavens were collapsing and the earth was collapsing. Nie Tian narrowed his eyes, unable to conceal the nervousness in his heart. He didn't expect Mu Xiaoquan's power to be so terrifying. Although Hua Qiqiao was the evil lord, could he really withstand a strike from the complete Orochi? As of now, Nie Tian had not seen any power from Hua Qiqiong that could resist the complete Orochi. However, Hua Qiqiao's calmness revealed that he still had trump cards that he had yet to reveal. Boom! At the same time, the Orochi unleashed its majestic power. The 8 heads looked down at the same time, and 8 terrifying forces whistled out and converged in the air, forming a chaotic vortex. It moved as fast as a meteor and pressed down on Hua Qiqiao. End of the 5 virtues, the way of the saints. Hua Qiqiao frowned as he murmured something. He had no intention of dodging, but he continued to walk forward step by step. Whoosh! Hua! Hua! As he stepped forward, a 5-colored radiance bloomed under his feet with every step he took. It was like a lotus seal that shone in all directions. Moreover, with every step Hua Qiqiao took, the 5-colored radiance under his feet grew brighter. When he took his 7th step, it was as if there was a blazing sun under his feet. The radiance was so bright that it engulfed his entire body, and no one dared to look at it directly. Boom! In the next moment, the 5-colored radiance bloomed in all directions and directly collided with the blade of chaos. There was a roar in the void, and the chaotic power of the Orochi started to burn like a tragic meteor streaking across the atmosphere. How is this possible? Mu Xiaoquan's eyes reflected a scarlet flame. He looked at the Orochi in disbelief, as if he was witnessing the most terrifying scene in his life. He had experienced countless battles and countless life and death situations in his life, but those were nothing compared to the scene in front of him. As the Lord of the Orochi, he had always hidden his Orochi power and bided his time in front of others, never revealing too much of his power. Everyone in the Abyss believed that the strongest among the 3 swords of the Abyss was the 7 cruel sword, Duguji. However, Mu Xiaoquan was confident that he was not weaker than Duguji. Mu Xiaoquan admitted that he might not be the strongest swordsman in the Abyss, but he had a higher chance of winning if he were to fight to the death against Duguji. Now, the Orochi power that he had hidden the deepest and proudest secret in his life was blocked by Hua Qiqiao. How could he not be shocked, aghast, and fearful? Even though Hua Qiqiao was known as the evil lord, Mu Zhaoquan only respected him on the surface. He never thought that the former had the ability to defeat him. However, Hua Qiqiao was tearing his confidence apart bit by bit, just like how he was stepping on his dignity. Just as Hua Qiqiao had said, he had underestimated the people of the world. At that moment, the Orochi flame approached Hua Qiqiao, but it was like an arrow at the end of its flight. At the last moment, it dissipated in front of Hua Qiqiao. Yin and Yang, 5 elements unite. Then, Hua Qiqiao's voice sounded like the judgment of fate. When it fell into Mu Zhaoquan's ears, he felt like he had fallen into an abyss. Swoosh! In the next moment, a 5-colored light swept across the sky. It was so dazzling that it felt like a lifetime had passed. 7 steps to sever the snake. Then, the corner of Hua Qiqiao's mouth twitched, and he uttered these words. Almost at the same time, the 5-colored light disappeared in a flash. The 8 heads of the Orochi were all chopped off. The Orochi power dissipated with the wind. After a while, the void was silent. Only the sound of the wind whistling could be heard, but it was filled with a sharp aura. The 5 virtues, end and beginning, the way of the sage. Yin and Yang, 5 elements unite. 7 steps to sever the snake. The light around Hua Qiqiao dissipated. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, looking aloof and peerless. Mu Zhaoquan's body was badly mutilated, as if his skin had been peeled off. His body trembled incessantly, but his eyes flickered with surprise. His lips trembled slightly, as if he wanted to say something, but no sound came out. Venerable Orochi, it's over. Hua Qiqiao's eyes were as cold as frost. His faint voice sounded as if he was sighing about something. Mu Zhaoquan's mouth twitched. He used the last bit of his strength to shout a word, but he could not say the rest. In the next moment, his body trembled, and he finally lost his last breath of life. He fell straight to the ground like a withered leaf. The first venerable Orochi of the Orochi tribe had lost his life. Chapter 45-47. High up in the sky, the wind was calm, and the clouds were quiet. However, there was a strong, murderous aura quietly spreading. Hua's 7 orifices stood alone in the void. His solitary figure was out of this world. He was one of the 4 great evil lords of the Ghost Clan, yet he was able to remain calm in the face of Lord Orochi. He fused the power of Yin and Yang and the 5 elements to execute the snake in 7 steps. Hua Qiqiao truly lived up to his name as the evil lord. Countless gazes in the surroundings focused on the figure. The shock in their hearts could not be any greater. This person is so strong. 7 steps, snake executioner. Such power has likely surpassed those apex all heavens experts. That Lord Orochi was also a true powerhouse. It's a pity that he met Lord Supreme Flower. I can only say that he has no regrets, even if he dies. The crowd began to whisper among themselves as they looked at Hua Qiqiao with even more respect and caution. However, at this moment, Tian's eyes narrowed as if he had noticed something. He couldn't help but become nervous. Supreme Flower has exhausted too much of his power. I'm afraid he won't be able to fight anymore. Guling Wuji also sensed that Hua Qiqiao's aura was weakening and said in a deep voice, "Yes." Tian nodded solemnly and did not say anything else. He could already tell that Hua Qiqiao did not expend too much energy, but it was because of the backlash from the body of 5 virtues. Almost all powerful forces in the world had varying degrees of backlash, and the stronger the force, the greater the backlash. Just like Rui Qianyu's 9-colored pupils, even after she had awakened the 10 annihilations of the evil woman, the 9-colored pupils still gave her a lot of pressure. In fact, every time Tian's God Fiend body was activated, it would cause backlash to his martial body. However, Tian's martial body was already strong, and with the addition of the 10th meridian, the backlash would quickly recover. However, Hua Qiqiao did not have a strong martial body. In addition to activating the body of 5 virtues, he had also integrated the power of yin and yang. That was why he could achieve the magnificent feat of killing the snake in 7 steps. But now, the flower's 7 apertures martial body had suffered a backlash and was already very weak, unable to continue fighting. Supreme Flower, you've done enough. Tian thought to himself. Without any hesitation, he leaped into the air and arrived beside Hua Qiqiao. Tian, I'm fine. Although Hua Qiqiao was very weak, he was still holding on with a smile on his face. Senior Supreme Flower, please come down and rest. Tian smiled faintly. He placed his palm on Hua Qiqiao's back and sent a stream of life force into the latter's body. Hua Qiqiao knew that Tian had seen through his condition, and his expression was slightly awkward. He thought for a moment and decided not to force the issue. He nodded and prepared to go to the central pavilion to rest. Evil Lord of the Ghost Clan, are you ready to enter the stage now? But at this moment, a thunderous voice rang out. Then, a transcendent aura appeared in the sky and descended like a meteor. After this figure descended, the void was filled with a thunderous aura. The dazzling light made it impossible to see the figure's face clearly. Hua Qiqiao frowned. His third eye appeared on his forehead again, and he unleashed a blade of eye force that tore through the lightning in the sky. In the next moment, the thunder subsided slightly, and a figure slowly walked out. His long hair fluttered in the wind, and he was a middle-aged, elegant man. Brother Hua, long time no see. The elegant man's face was extremely handsome, and he was not inferior to Hua Qiqiao in any way. His eyes were bright and deep, and they were locked on Hua Qiqiao from afar. There was a hint of oppression in his calm tone, but it was as if he was greeting an old friend that he had not seen in a long time. Fang Junxian. Hua Qiqiao called out the elegant man's name when he saw his face clearly. He had never panicked before. Even when facing Mu Zhaoquan's 8-branch true body, Hua Qiqiao did not panic at all. Why was he panicking when he saw Fang Junxian? Tian's eyebrows furrowed as he had a bad premonition. Although Fang Junxian's aura was not strong, Tian had a feeling that this person's strength was definitely in the top 10 of all the experts he had met. Moreover, from Hua Qiqiao's reaction, Fang Junxian's strength was not to be underestimated. Hua Qiqiao seemed to be very familiar with Fang Junxian, but he did not know the latter's identity. It's been so long since we parted in a hurry. Fang Junxian smiled faintly. His voice was pleasant to the ear, but there was a hint of vicissitudes and calmness in it. I didn't expect that after so many years, Brother Hua's demeanor is still the same as before. Fang Junxian, tell me why you're here. Hua Qiqiao naturally knew that Fang Junxian was not here to reminisce, so he did not beat around the bush and spoke directly. Fang Junxian frowned and suddenly turned to Tian with a smile. You're indeed not simple to be able to escape from the Pavilion Master. Tian's face sank when he heard the words Pavilion Master, and his heart trembled violently. The Pavilion Master that Fang Junxian mentioned should be the Pavilion Master of the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion. Could it be that Fang Junxian was from the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion? You're here for Tian? Although Hua Qiqiao had his guesses, Fang Junxian's reaction still surprised him. This is my duty, so I have to do it. Fang Junxian nodded slightly and said in a low voice, Then your opponent will be me. Hua Qiqiao's eyes narrowed as he took a step forward and shielded Tian behind him. Although he was almost exhausted, he had no choice but to fight. Tian was too weak to fight Fang Junxian. Brother Hua, forgive me for being blunt, but you can't even withstand a single blow from me. Fang Junxian seemed a little helpless as he spoke in a low voice. This is my duty, so I have to fight. Hua Qiqiao's eyes trembled as he replied firmly. Since Yin Fenghua had entrusted Tian to him, it was his duty to protect Tian. Even if he had to lose his life, he would not hesitate. Senior Hua Qiqiao, Tian was moved by the determination in Hua Qiqiao's eyes, but he did not know what to say. The two of them had never met before, and their only connection was Yin Fenghua. yet Hua Kikikiko was willing to risk his life for him. Nie Tian would forever remember this kindness. I'm fine. Hua Kikikiko smiled and looked at Fong Junxian proudly. Come on, let me see how strong the sacred protector of the heavenly Tao sacred pavilion is. Nie Tian's eyes trembled. So Fong Junxian was the sacred protector of the heavenly Tao sacred pavilion. No wonder he was so strong. Brother Hua, why are you doing this? Fong Junxian frowned helplessly. Once upon a time, he and Hua Kikikiko were insignificant. Although they were not close friends, they were good friends. But now, they had to fight for their own master. Hua Kikikiko's eyes were resolute as he stepped forward. He was prepared for the worst. A sacred protector of the heavenly Tao sacred protector actually has to fight with someone so heavily injured. Isn't it a little embarrassing? However, at that moment, laughter rang out in the sky. It was a playful laughter. Why don't you let me experience the strength of the heavenly law divine protectors? Chapter 45-48. Fong Junxian could not help but frown when he heard the sudden playful laughter, but he soon smiled and said, Friend, since you're already here, why don't you show yourself? Fong Junxian appeared calm on the surface, but deep down, he was feeling uneasy. He did not notice that someone was closing in on him. While he was not a perception-type martial artist, the fact that the other party was able to approach him without him noticing showed that the other party's strength was extraordinary. This aura, is it you? Hua Qiqiong muttered to himself with a frown, as if he was surprised. Lord Divine Protector, I'm right behind you. Just as Fong Junxian finished speaking, a mocking voice rang out once more. Fong Junxian's face darkened as he felt a chilling aura. His heart skipped a beat. Swoosh! In the next moment, before Fong Junxian could react, a streak of sword chi flashed past him and left a glaring sword mark on his cheek. Fong Junxian's face darkened. Despite being a seasoned veteran, he could not help but feel enraged. A sword mark was a great humiliation to any martial artist, not to mention a heavenly sacred protector like him. Boom! Fong Junxian abruptly turned around, and a powerful aura erupted from his body. Like a volcano erupting, the aura spread out in all directions, causing the heavens and earth to rumble as if they were on the verge of collapsing. Hua Qiqiong's expression flickered as he sensed the oppressive force. He took a step forward and shielded Nie Tian behind him. Bang! With a muffled sound, Hua Qiqiong retreated rapidly. However, Nie Tian hid behind him and was not injured at all. Senior Hua Supreme, are you all right? Nie Tian asked hurriedly as he felt Hua Kikikion's blood surging and the aura in his body becoming chaotic. Ugh! Before Hua Kikikiong could reply, he spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was as white as a sheet. Nie Tian was shocked. He immediately activated his 10th vital meridian and poured life energy into Hua Kikikion's body in an attempt to stabilize the chaotic aura in his body. Pooh! However, he didn't expect that the berserk aura would be so violent. It suddenly exploded and actually sent him flying back several meters. After staggering, he spat out a mouthful of dirty blood. Immediately, Hua Qiqiao's expression changed drastically. His handsome facial features contorted into a hideous grimace. It was obvious that he was suffering from qi deviation. Senior, seeing this scene, Nie Tian's heart jumped to his throat. With a low shout, he charged over. Hua Qi was in a frenzy. He had clearly lost control of himself. If he couldn't control himself, his soul would be possessed by the devil, or he would die on the spot. Boom! However, as soon as Nie Tian got close, a violent force erupted from Hua Qiqiao's body and forced him back. Oh no! Nie Tian barely managed to stabilize himself, and his expression changed drastically. At this moment, a third eye appeared on Hua Qiqiao's forehead. Clearly, he had completely lost control of his power. In the nick of time, a powerful sword essence came crashing down and forcefully forced Hua Qiqiao to retreat repeatedly. Almost at the same time, a figure appeared in the sky. With a point of a finger, a powerful sword intent surged out and pierced into Hua Qiqiao's third eye. Hua Qiqiao's body trembled, and he fainted. The figure caught Hua Qiqiao and came to Nie Tian's side. Thank you, senior. Receiving Hua Qiqiao, Nie Tian saw that the other party was an old man with white hair and a beard. He quickly bowed to express his gratitude, but in his heart he was puzzled. Who exactly was this old man that suddenly appeared, and why did he lend a hand? His aura has stabilized, but he's temporarily unconscious. The old man smiled faintly, then raised his head and locked his eyes on Fang Junxian. Lord Sacred Protector, you have quite a temper. Fang Junxian frowned, then regained his composure. I heard that when the abyss secluded itself into the eternal abyss, Elder Wan Jian also went into seclusion. After Elder Wan Jian went into seclusion, he accepted 3 talented disciples from the abyss. After Elder Wan Jian passed away, these 3 disciples grew to become the strongest swordsmen in the abyss, and they are known as the 3 swords of the abyss. Your sword Dao has reached perfection, and you have the aura of the abyss. You must be one of the 3 swords of the abyss. If I'm not wrong, you must be the strongest of the 3 swords of the abyss, 7-remnant sword Dugu Ji. Killing intent surged in Fang Junxian's eyes as he said this. Dugu Ji. Nie Tian's eyes widened when he heard this name. He had heard from Bing Ji and the others that the strongest of the 3 swords of the abyss was 7-remnant sword Dugu Ji, known as the number 1 swordsman of the abyss. Before Bing Ji left, she promised Nie Tian that she would find someone to protect the Feng Tian sect in her place. Now, it seemed that this person was most likely 7-remnant sword Dugu Ji. Lord Divine Protector rarely leaves the heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion, yet you have such a deep understanding of the abyss. You are truly thoughtful. Dugu Ji nodded with a smile. Ha! Fang Junxian smiled. Before I came, the Pavilion Master told me to pay special attention to a few people in the sacred world of 7 cultivators. You are one of them. Oh, Dugu Ji laughed. It's rare for the Pavilion Master to think so highly of me. Shouldn't I feel honored? The Pavilion Master has always been generous to the experts of the world. If Mr. Dugu doesn't mind, you can follow me back to the Sacred Pavilion and discuss martial arts with the Pavilion Master. Wouldn't that be great? Fang Junxian said loudly. I appreciate the Pavilion Master and Divine Protector's good intentions. Dugu Ji could tell that Fang Junxian was trying to rope him in. It's just that I'm getting old and don't want to leave this place anymore. Mr. Dugu, this is an invitation from the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion. Are you really not going to consider it? Fang Junxian's face darkened and his tone turned cold. Forget it. I can't accept the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion's good intentions. Dugu Ji's lips twitched. His eyes were filled with determination. So you're saying that we can only fight? Fang Junxian's face darkened, and he made no attempt to hide his threat. If Lord Divine Protector wishes to fight, I will accompany you to the end. Dugu Qian smiled faintly. Sword aura surrounded him, and he seemed to have transformed into a different person, extremely sharp. Come on then. Fang Junxian's pupils constricted abruptly, while his last trace of patience had been completely worn away. He stopped concealing anything and took a step forward. A surging aura erupted from him, and it charged forward to the point space, and the surroundings shook, the weather dimmed, and the sun and moon dimmed. Nie Tian's heart skipped a beat when he saw Fang Junxian's aura. Fang Junxian's aura was no weaker than the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion Masters. Come on. Dugu Ji responded proudly and took a step forward. His sword intent tore through the sky and left a sharp ray of light in the air. What a powerful sword intent! Nie Tian's face changed, and he could not help but feel his blood boiling. Dugu Ji's sword intent was no weaker than Yin Feng's. Chapter 45-49. Nie Tian had not expected Dugu Ji's sword intent to be so strong that it was almost on par with Yin Feng Wuwa. But Dugu Ji had clearly not reached the realm of one with the sword. This meant that his potential was greater than Yin Feng Wuwa's. The crowd was also shocked by the auras of the 2 men in the sky. They stared at them in disbelief. No one had expected that the battle that Fang Jin had instigated would turn out like this. At the start, it had only been a battle between ordinary experts. But now, It had become a battle between apex experts, Dugu Ji and Fong Junxian. One was the top swordsman of the abyss, and the other was the sacred protector of the heavenly Tao sacred pavilion. Either one of them was an existence that could dominate any sacred world. It's been many years since I've seen such a powerful and sharp sword intent. Fong Junxian thought to himself in astonishment. Dugu Ji slowly stepped forward, his eyes fixed on Fong Junxian, but his mind was not on the latter. Nie Tian. All of a sudden, Dugu Qian's voice entered Nie Tian's ears. His expression flickered with astonishment, and he immediately focused his attention. Leave the heavenly Tao sacred protector to me, but I can sense that there's someone hiding in the void. This person is the real threat. Dugu Qian was calm and collected as he secretly transmitted his voice. There's another lurker. Nie Tian's expression changed again, and he almost shouted. But when he looked around, he could not sense any aura. Moreover, Fat Cat had not warned him. Clearly, this lurker was very skilled. Thank you for the reminder, Senior. Nie Tian naturally understood Dugu Ji's meaning. After agreeing, he immediately returned to the central pavilion with Hua Qiqiao. Although Dugu Ji was strong, he could not crush Fong Junxian. Even if Dugu Ji could win the next battle, it would most likely be a Pyrrhic victory. If that happened, Dugu Ji would lose the ability to continue fighting. In that case, the Feng Tian sect could only take care of the last person lurking in the void. However, the awkward thing was that the Feng Tian sect no longer had any combat power. The fact that the assassin had hidden until the very last moment meant that he was no weaker than Fong Junxian. How could the Feng Tian sect deal with such a powerful opponent? Nie Tian, is the Flower Supreme all right? Seeing that Nie Tian had returned, Guling Wuji quickly asked. I'm fine for now. Nie Tian nodded slightly and placed the flower's 7 apertures into the 9 extremities. Nie Tian, who is this lord? Guling Wuji looked at Dugu Ji and asked. Nie Tian briefly explained Dugu Ji's identity, but his expression did not relax at all. Instead, it revealed an unconcealable worry. Nie Tian, what happened? Guling Wuji felt a little strange. Since an expert like Dugu Ji had appeared, what did Nie Tian have to worry about? Nie Tian didn't hide anything and told him about the infiltrator. Calmness. Guling Wuji let out a cry of shock and was speechless. Initially, he had thought that the Feng Tian sect's threat would be limited to the heavenly law divine protector's appearance. He had not expected that there would still be people hiding in the dark. Senior Guling, let me fight the last battle. At this moment, Nie Tian's gaze suddenly focused, and he said in a heavy tone, You? Guling Wuji was stunned. Immediately after, he thought of something and said in shock, Nie Tian, you really want to? I don't care what method you use, but you must raise my strength to the Tian realm. Before Guling Wuji could finish, Nie Tian said directly. Previously, he had already asked Guling Wuji if there was any method to raise his strength. Guling Wuji had hesitated at that time, which meant that such a method existed. Nie Tian, you should know that any method to raise one's strength is extremely dangerous. You? Guling Wuji frowned and looked troubled. I'm willing to pay any price. Nie Tian once again interrupted Guling Wuji and said in a heavy tone. Guling Wuji looked at Nie Tian and could feel the determination in his eyes. His heart couldn't help but tremble. Come with me. After a moment of silence, Guling Wuji finally nodded and said in a deep voice. The two took one last look at Dugu Ji and Fong Junxian in the sky, then turned around and left. Dugu Ji was obviously buying time for Nie Tian, so he was not in a hurry to fight with Fong Junxian. After a while, Nie Tian arrived at the Feng Tian sect Heaven's Boundary Peak under Guling Wuji's lead. The Heaven's Boundary Peak was the sacred peak of the Feng Tian sect, and the Heaven Beacon altar was located on this peak. The Heaven Beacon altar floated in the air at the top of the Heaven's Boundary Peak. Greetings, Beacon Emperor, sect leader. Nie Tian and Guling Wuji landed. The two protectors at the Heaven Beacon altar bowed in unison with puzzled expressions. They didn't know why Nie Tian and Guling Wuji had suddenly come here. Go and inform the altar protector, Chao Chicheng, to come here immediately. Guling Wuji glanced at the two protectors and said indifferently, "Yes." The two protectors were puzzled, but didn't dare to ask further. They answered and immediately went to summon Chao Chicheng. Nie Tian looked at the heaven beacon altar and focused on the giant ball of light at the center of the 9 pillars. The giant ball of light was the Fengtian sect's sect light, which symbolized the future of the Fengtian sect. In ancient times, when the Fengtian sect was at its peak, the sect light shone brightly and covered the entire Heaven Beacon mountain range with rainbow-colored light. After that, the Fengtian sect declined and the sect light dimmed. Not long ago, Nie Tian's appearance had caused the sect light to shine with rainbow-colored light once again. But now, the sect light was extremely dim. The circle of light couldn't even cover the entire heaven's boundary peak. Moreover, it was flickering as if it could be extinguished at any time. This also meant that the Fengtian sect had reached a moment of life and death. Nie Tian, this is the Heaven Beacon altar. The ball of light you see is called the sect light. It symbolizes the future of the Fengtian sect. Guling Wuji's gaze landed on the dim sect light. His tone was somewhat sorrowful. "Senior Guling, please believe in me. I will definitely make the sect light shine once again. I will make the sect light shine brightly in the All Saints world." Nie Tian's expression was calm. His tone was indifferent, but it was filled with absolute dominance and confidence. Guling Wuji looked at Nie Tian and did not say anything else. He only nodded. This time, he was prepared to bet the survival of the Fengtian sect on Nie Tian. He firmly believed that Nie Tian would not disappoint him or the Fengtian sect. A figure descended a moment later. It was the guardian of the Fengtian sect's altar, Chao Chicheng. Lord Beacon Emperor, Sect Master Guling. Chao Chicheng seemed to have guessed something when he saw Nie Tian and Guling Wuji. His expression darkened, and he bowed slightly. "Chao Chicheng, prepare for the Heaven Beacon blood sacrifice." Guling Wuji swept his gaze across Chao Chicheng and said without any nonsense, "Heaven Beacon blood sacrifice." Chao Chicheng's expression changed drastically when he heard those words. His eyes widened and he exclaimed almost instinctively, "You mustn't." Chapter 4550. Chao Chicheng was shocked like never before when he heard that Guling Wuji wanted to carry out the heavenly blood sacrifice. As a guardian of the Fengtian sect's altar, Chao Chicheng knew better than anyone what the heavenly blood sacrifice meant. The sect's luminescence represented the Fengtian sect's lifeline and future. The heavenly blood sacrifice was risking the sect's luminescence. Had the Fengtian sect really reached a point where it had to stake everything on one throw? Sect Master Guling, the heavenly blood sacrifice. Chao Chicheng spoke after a while, but he was interrupted by Guling Wuji before he could finish. "I know very well what the heavenly blood sacrifice means." Guling Wuji's gaze was deep. He had already made up his mind. However, the Fengtian sect has reached a moment of life and death today. The heavenly blood sacrifice is the only way. Chao Chicheng looked at Guling Wuji and fell silent for a long time, before finally nodding. The heavenly blood sacrifice had to be carried out at this juncture. "Go make the preparations." Guling Wuji let out a long sigh and waved his hand. He seemed to have aged a few decades in an instant. "Yes." Chao Chicheng responded and left. "Senior Guling, what exactly is the heavenly blood sacrifice?" Nie Tian could not help but ask after Chao Chicheng's figure disappeared. Judging from Guling Wuji's and Chao Chicheng's reactions, the heavenly blood sacrifice clearly had a great impact on the Fengtian sect. "Nie Tian, do you know the essence of the sect's luminescence?" Guling Wuji did not answer Nie Tian and instead asked a question. "Essence?" Nie Tian frowned and shook his head. Guling Wuji was not surprised. He sighed softly and said, "The history of the All-Heaven Sacred World can be divided into 4 eras: the Yuan Continent Era, the Primordial Continent Era, the All-Heavens Continent Era, and the All-Heavens Sacred World Era." "Yes." Nie Tian nodded and could not help but show great interest. He did not know much about the All Heavens sacred world's history. He only knew the primordial era, Archean era, Middle Archean era, and Lower Archean era. It was the first time Guling Wuji had heard about the primordial continent era, the ancient continent era, the heavenly continent era, and the heavenly sacred world era. Guling Wuji looked at the horizon and continued. Legend has it that the original all-heaven sacred world was a spherical continent with an extremely small surface area and an extremely high concentration of origin energy. That continent was about the same size as the current dimensional world, or even smaller. It was the earliest form of the sacred world, and it was called the Yuan continent. Yuan continent. Nietian's eyes narrowed, and he was shocked. The current all-heaven saints world was composed of countless saints' worlds and dark regions. Each saint world was surrounded by countless realms, and each realm was composed of many planes of existence. Therefore, the number of planes and worlds in the entire sacred world was estimated to be in the hundreds of millions. It was hard to imagine that the original Yuan continent was only the size of a plane world. Guling Wuji took a deep breath and continued. No one knows how long the Yuan continent has existed, but it began to expand at an extremely fast rate. Slowly, it became a huge world. It was called the Ancient Continent, and this period is also called the Ancient Continent Era. After that, after an unknown number of years, the Ancient Continent also began to expand, crazily releasing origin energy into the surrounding space, causing the density of origin energy in the Ancient Continent to decrease rapidly. Gradually, it formed an even wider continent, the Heavens Continent. This period was also the Heavens Continent Era. After that, the Heavenly Continent split and formed a relatively independent sacred world. In the end, it formed the current all-heaven sacred world, which is also the current all-heaven sacred world era. I see. Nietian nodded slightly. He now had a general understanding of the various eras of the all-heaven sacred world. However, he was very confused. Why did Guling Wuji say all this? Did it have anything to do with the clan light? During the primordial continent era, the first batch of Saint Realm warriors appeared in the human race. Guling Wuji ignored Nietian's confusion and continued. It said that it was this first batch of Saint Realm warriors who established the entire system of martial arts cultivation. Therefore, they were respectfully called Ancient Saints by later generations. Ancient Saints. Nietian's eyes slightly darkened. He had heard Fat Cat mention Ancient Saints before. However, he didn't know that Ancient Saints appeared during the Primordial Continent era. Yes, Guling Wuji nodded and said, among the Ancient Saints, there are strong and weak ones. The 9 strongest ones are called the 9 Great Ancient Saints. The 9 Great Ancient Saints are respected by tens of thousands of people. They protect the Ancient Continent and maintain the order of the Ancient Continent. As he spoke, Guling Wuji suddenly looked at the clan light. His eyes became a little strange. After a moment of silence, he continued, although the Ancient Saints are strong, their lifespans are limited. The 9 Great Ancient Saints were worried that after they died, the Ancient Continent would fall into chaos. Thus, they agreed to sacrifice themselves to protect the Ancient Continent in another way. The 9 Great Ancient Saints sacrificed themselves to protect the Ancient Continent. It's admirable. Nietian also looked at the clan light. He had already guessed something and said in a deep voice, yes. Guling Wuji nodded heavily. His eyes that were looking at the clan light had a faint light flashing. He said, Fengtian Mountain Range is the place where one of the 9 Great Ancient Saints died. Indeed, Nietian had vaguely guessed it, but his heart still shivered. It seemed that the clan light was closely related to the ancient Saint Master who had died that year. Nietian, you already know that the entire Fengtian sect is a great formation that is made of human bodies. Guling Wuji's eyes were deep as he asked, do you know who this great formation originated from? That ancient Saint Master. Nietian immediately understood. His eyes trembled as he blurted out, yes. Guling Wuji nodded and said, before ancient Saint Master died, he used himself as a guide to build the Fengtian Grand Array. Every mountain gate and every stone statue of the Fengtian sect contains the bloodline and divine soul of ancient Saint Master. So that's how it is. Nie Tian was shocked. After learning the truth, he had a different feeling about everything in front of him. The Fengtian Grand Array was unimaginably huge. It was the most terrifying great formation that Nie Tian had ever seen. The fact that ancient Saint Master turned his body into a formation showed how powerful he was when he was alive. It was hard to believe that such a powerful person existed in this world. Nie Tian guessed that with ancient Saint Master's strength, even an expert like the young God-Sword Emperor wouldn't be able to contend against him. Then the clan light. Then Nie Tian suddenly thought of something. His eyes trembled as he looked at the clan light. His lips trembled slightly, and he couldn't speak for a while. The clan light must have originated from ancient Saint Master, and it was very likely that it was the most important part of him. Chapter 45:51. Heart. Upon hearing Gu Ling Wuji's words, Nie Tian's eyes flickered violently. It was easy to imagine how shocked he was. No wonder the sect light was so important to the Fengtian sect. It was the Saint Venerable Gu's heart. The fact that a heart could exist for so long and still emit light showed how powerful the Saint Venerable was. The Saint Venerable Gu sacrificed himself to protect this world after his death. Gu Ling Wuji looked at the sect light with a solemn face and said in a deep voice, "However, how could Lord Gu Ling Wuji imagine that the ancient continent would become the all-heavens sacred world? The changes of the continent and the power of the world aren't something a human can resist." Nie Tian's eyes narrowed as he fell silent. Nie Tian, the sky beacon blood sacrifice we're going to do is related to the sect light. Moments later, Gu Ling Wuji calmed down a lot. He looked at Nie Tian and explained, "The so-called heaven-burning blood sacrifice uses one's bloodline as a catalyst to trigger the resonance of one's bloodline and draw it into one's body to strengthen one's strength." Elder Gu Ling, are you saying that I'm going to fuse with the sect light? Nie Tian frowned and asked in confusion. It's not a fusion. It's just a temporary resonance. Gu Ling Wuji shook his head and explained patiently. The sect light is too powerful. Ordinary cultivators can't bear it, let alone fuse with it. The sky beacon blood sacrifice only allows you to resonate with the sect light. That way, you can gain power from it. But your martial body is too weak. It can't bear the power of the sect light for a long time. When the sect light senses that your martial body can't bear it, it will leave your body. Yes, Nie Tian didn't quite understand, but he still nodded. When the sect light resonates with you, it will devour your life and cause irreversible damage. Gu Ling Wuji's eyes darkened, and he continued, "In the history of the Fengtian sect, only 2 people have performed the sky beacon blood sacrifice, and they were close to the peak of the sky martial realm. Even so, after the heaven beacon blood sacrifice, the 2 of them suffered great damage to their life veins and died not long after." As he spoke, Gu Ling Wuji looked at Nie Tian and said in a low voice, "You're too weak, but your life vein is much stronger than theirs. Plus, you have the 10th life vein, so you should be able to withstand the power of the clan's light." Yes, Nie Tian nodded. There was no sign of retreat in his eyes. Even though there was the danger of his life veins being damaged, he was still fearless. At this time, Chao Qiqing returned, followed by a dozen altar guards. "Lord Beacon Emperor, Sect Master Gu Ling, we are ready." Chao Qiqing did not say much and said directly, "Then let's begin." Gu Ling Wuji nodded slightly with a solemn look on his face. If it wasn't a matter of life and death, he definitely wouldn't let Nie Tian and the light of the clan take the risk. Chao Qiqing nodded and said to Nie Tian, "Lord Beacon Emperor, you just need to sit in the center of the altar and relax your body. No matter what happens, don't resist. Leave the rest to us." "Thank you." Nie Tian smiled faintly and jumped to the center of the altar. He sat cross-legged with his eyes closed, as if he was cultivating normally. Chao Qiqing ordered a dozen or so altar guards to sit down around Nie Tian. Once everyone was seated, Chao Qiqing carefully checked again to make sure there was nothing wrong. Only then did he feel slightly relieved. "Sect Master Gu Ling, I'm going to start." Chao Qiqing took a deep breath and looked at Guling Wuji. How could Guling Wuji not understand that Chao Qiqing was asking at the end, but he did not speak and only nodded heavily. Chao Qiqing's eyes were deep and did not say anything else. He spread out his hands, and runes gushed out from his palms, flowing in the air and quickly forming a small sacred array that enveloped Nietian and the others. Blood array open. Chao Qiqing bellowed and pressed down with both hands, instantly opening the array. In an instant, within the blood array, countless blood-red sharp blades appeared and directly pierced towards Nietian and the others. PFFF, PFFF, PFFF. Instantly, the sound of flesh being cut was heard. Nietian and the others were instantly riddled with holes and became bloodied. However, these wounds were only superficial and perfectly avoided the vital parts. They were completely within the range of what Nietian and the others could endure. Within the blood array, blood splattered and the blood surged like a rain of blood. The Heaven Beacon blood sacrifice used the bloodline of a martial artist as a guide to trigger the resonance of the light of the clan. High up in the sky, the light of the clan felt the aura of the bloodline and suddenly brightened a little. At the same time, it began to slowly descend. The aura of the bloodline of Lord Beacon Emperor seems to be different from ordinary people. He can actually trigger the resonance of the light of the clan so easily. Seeing this scene, Chao Qiqing was shocked and felt that it was unbelievable. Originally, he was worried that Nietian's cultivation was too weak to trigger the light of the clan. He did not expect it to be so easy. Nietian's bloodline and martial body are far from ordinary people's. I hope he can withstand the pressure of the light of the clan. Guling Wuji's eyes darkened slightly, still a little worried. At this moment, the light of the clan had already landed on top of the blood array and began to slowly enter the blood array. Nietian closed his eyes and concentrated, but his heart was filled with awe. Being so close to the light of the clan made him feel a strong sense of restlessness in his bloodline. Moreover, the aura of the light of the clan also shocked him. It was as if the light of the clan still had a life of its own after tens of millions of years. Soon, the light of the clan completely entered the blood array and directly pressed down on top of Nietian's head. At this moment, Nietian clearly felt a violent surge of blood rushing in his body, as if it was about to burst out of his body. Nietian instinctively wanted to suppress this violent surge of energy. However, he suddenly remembered what Chao Qiqing said, that no matter what happened, he should not resist. Hence, he relaxed. Boom! Instantly, a violent surge of blood energy rushed out of Nietian's body, forming a bloody mist that enveloped the light of the clan. At the same time, the altar guards opened their eyes at the same time. They knew that the most crucial moment had arrived. The altar guards manipulated their lifelines at the same time and performed a shocking act. The altar guards' eyes were filled with determination as they forcefully extracted their lifelines from their bodies. Extracting one's own lifelines was an act of suicide. Guling Wuji and Chao Qiqing, who were watching from the side, were not surprised. Instead, they could not help but feel nervous. The altar guards were there to help Nietian merge the light of the clan. Their method was to use their lifelines as chains to lock the light of the clan. Inside the blood formation, a dozen or so altar guardians condensed the lifeline in their hands into lifeline chains, then extended them towards the light of the lineage, firmly locking it in place. The light of the clan seemed to have a life of its own. When it sensed that Nietian was about to absorb it, it began to resist and tried to escape from the blood array. However, it was locked down by the chains of lifelines and could not move at all. Suppress. The altar guards shouted in unison with determined expressions. The chains of lifelines in their hands pressed down, causing half of the light of the clan to merge with Nietian's martial body. Chapter 45-52. In the sky above the sky, Beacon Plaza, the battle between the strongest shook the heavens and the earth. Dugu Qian stood as cold as a sword. Sword will surged around him, and waves of sword chi spread out like ripples, spreading in all directions and creating a great momentum in the air. Fang Junxian felt the waves of sword will in the air. His eyes were dark and murderous. At this point, the two of them had already exchanged more than 10 blows, but there was no clear winner. Duguji, what are you waiting for? Fang Junxian could tell that Duguji was stalling for time, but he could not figure out what his motive was. Could it be that the Fengtian sect still had some hidden experts? Before coming here, Fang Junxian had a rough understanding of almost all the experts in the 7th Sacred Cultivator world. According to Heaven Dao Pavilion leader Yun Etian, other than the few old monsters in the Eternal Abyss, there was no one too strong in the 7th Sacred Cultivator world. To be honest, Fang Junxian was already surprised that Duguji had appeared. He did not believe that the few people in the Eternal Abyss would appear as well. Duguji, no matter who you are waiting for, the final result will not change. Even if you can defeat me, you cannot defeat the last person. Fang Junxian's eyes narrowed as he thought of the person hiding in the void. He felt much more at ease. Even Yunitian was wary of that person's strength. Not to mention Duguji. Even if his master, Elder Wan Jian, came back to life, he would not be a match for that person. The famous 7 broken swords of the Eternal Abyss is only SOSO. Fang Junxian could not help but laugh coldly. He took a step forward, and his aura exploded like an avalanche, threatening to engulf everything in its path. Is that so? Duguji also laughed coldly. He stepped on the ground lightly, and his sword will whistled as he forcefully broke through his opponent's aura. Duguji, show me your true strength. Fang Junxian did not want to waste any more time. His aura surged again, and the whistling sound was like thunder. A powerful ancient beast pounced on Fang Junxian. Very good. Duguji laughed and unsheathed the Heaven's Destroyer. A sharp aura pierced through the air and broke through the attack in front of him. Fang Junxian frowned as he felt an extreme chill assaulting him. He immediately retreated 100 meters away. Although he was not injured, he was in a sorry state. He finally drew his sword. Fang Junxian steadied himself, his eyes cold and murderous. Looks like I've underestimated you. If the Heavenly Divine Protector is only at this level, then it's too disappointing. Duguji smiled coldly, and the sword will around him suddenly exploded. Like a curtain of rain, it was extremely strange. Although Duguqian was very powerful and had been suppressing Fang Junxian throughout the battle, he could feel that there was a terrifying force within Fang Junxian's body that seemed to be stirring, waiting for the moment to explode. Enraging me is the biggest mistake you have made. Fang Junxian's lips curled into a cold smile. A layer of strange red flame appeared around his body. It was like fire in the sun. So this is your trump card. Duguji's eyes darkened as he smiled coldly. Is that all you've got? Is that so? Fang Junxian sneered as well. He seemed to be laughing at Duguji's ignorance because the latter did not know what this red flame was. As soon as he finished speaking, Fang Junxian flipped his palm over and a red flame shot out. It looked extremely small and was only a red line of fire, but if one looked closely, they would see that wherever the line of fire passed through, the void became misty, as if it had been destroyed. Duguji could feel that the red flame was extremely strange. He frowned and retreated. At the same time, the Heaven's Destroyer spun in the air and covered himself with a sword with shield. But the next moment, the line of fire reached him and easily pierced through the sword with shield. Then, it pierced through Duguji's arm. Duguji's eyes darkened. He looked down and saw that the place where his arm had been pierced was burning. The fire spread rapidly and covered half of his arm. How is this possible? Duguji was shocked. He immediately circulated the sword within his body, trying to extinguish the red flame. Unexpectedly, the sword will of the red flame sutra burned even more fiercely and spread to his entire arm. Duguqian's expression changed drastically. Making a prompt decision, he raised the crippling heaven and chopped off his entire arm with his sword. The arm was burned to ashes in the blink of an eye. Duguqian was so shocked that he was speechless for a moment. He was a divine ancestor in the 9th tier of the sky martial arts realm. His martial body was so strong that even the lava of a supervolcano could not cause any damage to him. But that red flame could actually burn his martial body, and even his sword could not extinguish it. It was too strange. The crowd was also stunned by the scene before them. Many people looked at Feng Junxian in fear. The layer of red flame around Feng Junxian's body could be said to be abnormal. The martial body of a sky martial ancestor was so strong that even heavenly fire could not invade it. But with Duguji's strength, he was almost burned to death by a red flame. How could the crowd not be shocked? What kind of flame is that? How can it be so strong? Not only did it break through the sword's shield, but it also almost burned him to death. That red flame is a little strange. It seems to be able to burn anything it touches. The Heaven Dao Sacred Pavilion's Heaven Dao Sacred Protector is indeed not an ordinary person. The Heaven Dao Sacred Pavilion is indeed the #1 power in the all heavens. The crowd calmed down and discussed softly. It was as if they could already see the outcome of the battle. Feng Junxian already had an overwhelming advantage. It was only a matter of time before he defeated Duguji. Up in the sky, Duguji was much calmer. His face was gloomy, and he still had a lingering fear. If he had not decisively severed his arm, he would have been burned to ashes by now. He could not figure out what kind of power that red flame was. How could it be so terrifying? Duguji, listen carefully. This is the power of the sun-devouring golden crow. Feng Junxian seemed to have seen through Duguji's doubts. He smiled cold and was full of arrogance. Sun-devouring golden crow. Duguji's eyes widened. One of the 9 great elemental beasts. Seems like you are not stupid. You actually know that the sun-devouring golden crow is one of the 9 great elemental beasts. Feng Junxian smiled like a god. The sun-devouring golden crow was one of the 9 great elemental beasts like Nietion's 9 extreme chaos beast, the myriad tribulation beast night elephant, and Xie Tianquang's thunder ape. It seems like the sun-devouring golden crow is a fire elemental beast. No wonder the power of the red flame was so terrifying. Duguji's eyes narrowed as he calmed down. Even at this moment, you can still maintain your composure. Should I say that you're stupid, or that you're not afraid of death? Feng Junxian's lips twitched coldly. A ball of golden crow flames appeared in his palm, and his eyes flashed with killing intent. Duguji laughed. Heavenly Dao Divine Protector, do you think that the 7 remnant sword is only this? As soon as he finished speaking, something strange happened. Duguji's body shook slightly, and his severed arm grew back. Moreover, the sword intent aura around him suddenly changed. It was a completely different sword aura from before, and it surged like the sea. Feng Yun Reading Net. Chapter 45-53. How is this possible? Feng Junxian exclaimed in shock when he saw Duguji's arm regenerate and exude a sword intent aura that was completely different from before. The martial body of a martial artist was far more powerful than that of an ordinary person. This was especially true for a sage realm martial artist. Their martial body was filled with rich world energy, so they could maintain a high level of activity. Therefore, their aging speed was extremely slow. Moreover, they could recover on their own as long as they didn't suffer a fatal injury. Most sage realm cultivators wouldn't be able to recover from a severed limb, but it would take some time. It was extremely rare to see someone like Duguji who could recover in the blink of an eye, unless their martial body was unique or they had a unique regeneration technique. Duguji was from the Abyss Ghost tribe, so it was normal for his martial body to be different from an ordinary person's. But Feng Junxian couldn't figure out how Duguji was able to exude a completely different sword intent aura. Compared to before, Duguji seemed to have undergone a metamorphosis. The sword intent aura around him had reached a whole new realm of swordsmanship. When the crowd saw the changes in Duguji's body, they were shocked beyond words. The 7 remnant sword technique can regrow his arm in the blink of an eye. His martial body must be different from an ordinary person's. His sword intent aura has changed too. Could he have cultivated many different sword intents? I don't think it's many sword intents. It's more like his sword intent has evolved. A strange light shone in the crowd's eyes as they spoke. Perhaps this battle wasn't going to be as simple as they had imagined. Something's not right. At this time, Fong Junxian, who was high up in the sky, noticed something. His expression changed, and he exclaimed, "Your body was originally incomplete. Your arm was formed from sword intent, and is not your original body." Lord Holy Protector saw through it. Good Qian smiled faintly. "I cultivate the seven remnant sword technique. So many parts of my body are incomplete. However, the seven remnant sword technique is enough to replace my incomplete body and even make my martial body stronger than an ordinary person's. So that's how it is." Fong Junxian calmed down, and a flame flashed in his eyes. He could see that Dugu Ji's entire body, other than his brain, heart, and a few other vital parts, was formed from sword intent. It was no exaggeration to say that 90% of Dugu Ji's body was formed by sword intent. It was no wonder that his sword aura was far stronger than that of a swordsman of the same level. It was even comparable to Yin Feng and Ata, who had reached the realm of becoming one with the sword. Yin Feng selfless and the young God Sword Emperor's one with the sword were achieved through the improvement of one's own sword intent. As for Dugu Ji's current state, it was more like he had become one with the sword. He was still a step away from truly becoming one with the sword. However, Dugu Ji's method had its limitations. He would never be able to use his sword intent to replace important parts like his brain and heart, so he would never be able to truly become one with his sword. So the Golden Crow's flames just now only burn a portion of your sword intent. Fong Junxian saw through Dugu Qian's true nature and could not help but smirk. "I'd like to see if you can rise from the ashes if I incinerate your entire body." Dugu Qian's face darkened. Boom! The moment his words landed, Fong Junxian flipped his palm, and a gust of golden crow flame burst forth, blooming in the air like a lotus flower. It then spread into a sea of fire, and a scorching aura permeated the entire area, heading straight for Dugu Qian. Cripple the seven remnant techniques, pardon the heavens for killing, reverse the flow in all directions, traceless sword. At the same time, Dugu Ji's voice rang through the air. His body was like a mountain, and he did not move an inch. The sword intent hidden in his body was finally unleashed. The ultimate moves of both sides would determine the victor. "You want to fight me? You're courting death." Fong Junxian could not help but sneer when he saw that Dugu Ji had no intention of retreating. He could already see the scene of Dugu Ji being burned to ashes by the Golden Crow's flames. Rumble, rumble, rumble. In the sky, the Golden Crow's flames roared like fire dragons and spread in all directions, incinerating everything in its path. Although Dugu Ji had unleashed a powerful sword intent, he was completely defenseless against the Golden Crow's flames and was instantly incinerated. The terrifying flames of the Golden Crow pressed down from all directions, drowning Dugu Qian within it. Everyone stared at the scene in the sky in shock. Their eyes were trembling, and their hearts were filled with indescribable shock. Dugu Ji had been engulfed in a sea of fire. Did that mean that he was no longer alive and had been reduced to ashes? But judging from Dugu Ji's aura, he should not have been so weak. The strongest swordsman in the abyss, seven remnant sword Dugu Ji, no longer exists today. Fong Junxian looked at the sea of fire in the distance and smiled cold. Swoosh! But at that moment, a sharp sword intent pierced through the sea of fire. It was so fast that it took no time to blink. Fong Junxian's face stiffened. He subconsciously summoned his Golden Crow shield, but he was too late. Puff! In the next moment, the sound of flesh being torn apart could be heard. Fong Junxian's body trembled, and he looked down to see that there was a hole in his chest where his heart was. Fresh blood flowed out and dyed his body red. This! Fong Junxian's mouth twitched. He wanted to say something, but no sound came out. Impossible, is it? Almost at the same time, a cold, mocking voice rang out. Fong Junxian turned around and saw a figure standing behind him. It was Dugu Ji. How could you? Fang Juanxian's voice trembled as he stared at Dugu Ji in disbelief. Dugu Ji was clearly buried in the sea of fire. How could he have escaped? That was the sun-devouring golden crow's flames, the most powerful flame in the world. How could Dugu Ji escape from the golden crow's flames? Lord Holy Protector, you underestimate the people of this world. Dugu Ji sneered. Do you really think that your golden crow's flames are invincible? What other power do you have? Fang Junxian used the last of his strength to forcefully hold on and asked unwillingly. The power of Dihong. Before Dugu Ji could speak, another voice rang out, cold and emotionless. Back then, it was rumored that Elder Wanjian possessed the power of Dihong. He hid in the eternal abyss to find an inheritor of the power of Dihong. It seems that the rumors are true. You finally showed up. Dugu Qian was not at all surprised by this voice that came out of nowhere. He turned his body to look at a figure in black standing not far away. The figure exuded waves of black aura like a dark abyss. Save me. When Fang Junxian saw the black-robed man, his eyes shone with despair, and he spoke with difficulty. Don't worry. The sword intent just now was restrained. Your heart is not completely destroyed. The black-robed man said emotionlessly, you have the sun-devouring golden crow in your body, so you won't die. But it will take some time for you to recover. Fang Juanxian's eyes lit up when he heard the black-robed man's words. He forced himself to stand. No wonder I felt the sword intent weakened. So it was you who attacked. Dugu Ji looked at the black-robed man and called out a name. Yuan Tianjili. Feng Yin Reading Net. Chapter 45-54. Yuan Tianjili. When Dugu Ji uttered this name, there was a slight tremor in his voice. The Li clan had 3 chiefs, and Yuan Tianjili was the strongest among the 3 chiefs. Dugu Ji had sensed that someone was hiding in the void, but he had never imagined that the person hiding was Yuan Tianjili. You're worthy of being old man Wan Jian's successor, to be able to recognize me. Yuan Tianjili was not afraid of his identity. He spoke in a low voice as he walked towards Dugu Ji, step by step. With every step he took, the surrounding space-time grew heavier, as if the world would split apart at any moment. Master once mentioned you, and said that you're the strongest person he's ever met in his life. Dugu Ji calmed down and spoke in a low voice, noticing that he did not sense any killing intent from Yuan Tianjili. Back then, Old Man Myriad Swords could be considered one of my strongest enemies. Yuan Tianli seemed to raise his head slightly and looked into the distance, as if he was thinking back to the past. He said, not only was he a powerful swordsman, but he was also one of the few remaining messengers. If he didn't have the power of Dihong, he wouldn't have been able to contend against me. As he spoke, Yuan Tianjili turned around. His eyes, hidden in the darkness, flickered with a strange light. He continued, you were able to block the Golden Crow's power, not because you're strong in the way of the sword, but because of the power of Dihong in your body. Of course I can't hide this from you. Dugu Ji nodded, not denying it. What kind of person was Yuan Tianjili? He was an existence that had transcended several eras, so he could naturally see the truth. However, the power of Dihong in your body isn't complete, so I'm guessing that you didn't inherit the power of Dihong, but only fused a portion of Dihong's power into your sword intent. Yuan Tianjili's eyes flickered again as he said lightly. Dugu Ji's eyes trembled, and he was quite surprised. He didn't expect Yuan Tianjili to be able to see through this. It was true that he had not inherited Dihong's power. Instead, with the help of Elder Wanjian, he had fused a portion of Dihong's power into his sword intent. Like the sun-swallowing golden crow, Dihong was also one of the 9 great essence beasts. Therefore, Dihong's power was able to resist the golden crow's flames. However, Dihong was a meta beast. Even someone as strong as Dugu Ji could not inherit it. Dihong has yet to find a true successor. This means that old man Wan Jian should still be alive. Yuan Tianjili seemed to be enjoying Dugu Ji's shocked reaction. Although Dugu Ji tried his best to remain calm, Yuan Tianjili's words still made his face change. Yuan Tianjili was able to infer from Di Hong's power that old man Wan Jian was still alive. This was something that Duguji didn't expect. Back then, after old man Wan Jian went into the eternal abyss, he announced that he had sealed his sword. Not long after, the news of his death spread. Everyone in the eternal abyss thought that old man Wan Jian was dead. Only Duguji and the other two knew that old man Wan Jian was still alive. Before finding Di Hong's successor, old man Wan Jian would not die. Don't worry, I don't have any grudges with old man Wan Jian. It's just that our positions are different. Since he has sealed his sword, I naturally won't look for him. Yuan Tianjili saw what Duguji was worried about and said indifferently, "Thank you, Your Excellency." Duguji frowned and bowed slightly to thank him. This thank you was sincere. Old man Wan Jian faked his death that year. Apart from wanting to retreat, he also didn't want to be disturbed. Now, although old man Wan Jian was still alive, he was old and his lifespan had reached its limit. He basically didn't interact with outsiders. I hope that old man Wan Jian can find Di Hong's successor as soon as possible. This world will have one more decent opponent. Yuan Tianjili opened his mouth again and revealed a rare emotion. He said, although old man Wan Jian had Di Hong, he couldn't unleash Di Hong's true power due to the hindrance of the martial body. Otherwise, with Di Hong's strength, it's not impossible for him to defeat me. As for the matter of Di Hong's successor, my master is already indifferent to it. Whether he can find it or not, it's up to heaven's will. Duguji was also a little helpless. He shook his head and smiled bitterly. Di Hong's successor was very important, and the requirements were very strict. Even people like Duguji and Bingji didn't meet the requirements. Yuan Tianjili was silent for a while and suddenly said, "You're waiting for that young man called Nie Tian, right?" Duguji's eyes shook violently, and he couldn't help but panic. "Don't panic. Your battle is over. The next battle belongs to me and Nie Tian." Yuan Tianjili let out a rare laugh and said, "I really want to know what level Nie Tian can reach after breaking through his limits." Yuan Tianjili was calm and composed. It was obvious that he already knew what Nie Tian was doing. The two of them didn't hide their conversation from the crowd, but everyone was confused. These two are experts from the eternal abyss. That is the place where the abyss ghost race lives, in seclusion. It seems that they are from the abyss ghost race. Why are they here? That lord's strength looks stronger than the 7 broken swords. Why does he want to fight with Nie Tian? Everyone knew Nie Tian's strength. Although he was talented, his realm was too low. He didn't even have the chance to fight before. Yuan Tianjili said he wanted to fight with Nie Tian. It was too strange. Boom! Just when everyone was confused, an enormous aura soared up from a mountain in the distance. It was like a mad dragon that soared into the clouds. Majestic waves spread in the sky and shook the earth. This is... Sensing the terrifying aura coming from the void, the crowd could not help but gasp in unison. The shock they felt was indescribable. Duguji was also shocked by the aura and couldn't speak for a while. He had never seen such an aura in his life. The Fengtian blood sacrifice is a success. Yuan Tianli raised his head and looked over with excitement in his tone. At the same time, on the Fengtian peak, boom, boom, boom. A terrifying power swirled around Nie Tian like a thunderstorm, rumbling incessantly. With the help of a dozen altar guards, the lineage light had completely entered Nie Tian's body. After a while, the lineage light finally resonated with Nie Tian. Nie Tian's power weakened and his whole body shone brightly. The holy light was like the sun, making people want to worship him. It's a success. Guling Wuqi and Chao Qiqing were excited. Their eyes sparkled. The Fengtian blood sacrifice was smoother than they had expected. Nie Tian's martial body was stronger than they had expected. They didn't know what realm Nie Tian's cultivation had reached. At this moment, Nie Tian suddenly opened his eyes. His star-like eyes were unusually bright as he looked down at the world. The 9th level of the Heaven Martial Realm. Nie Tian felt the power in his body and clenched his fists. He felt like he was in control of the world. After the Fengtian blood sacrifice, It resonated with the lineage light and allowed Nye Tion's cultivation to reach the 9th level of the Heaven Martial Realm. Chapter 4555. The 9th level of the Sky Martial Realm. After the heavenly blood sacrifice, Nye Tion's cultivation had reached the peak of the Sky Martial Realm. The surging power in his body made his blood boil. Nye Tion hadn't expected that his strength would increase by so much after merging with the sect light, which was far beyond his estimation. Lord Beacon Emperor, how do you feel now? Chao Qiqing was just as excited as Nye Tion, but he suppressed his excitement and stepped forward. The heavenly blood sacrifice had allowed Nye Tion's cultivation to reach the 9th level of the Sky Martial Realm, which Chao Qiqing didn't expect. He originally thought that even if Nye Tion's martial body was special and he had the 10th meridian, he wouldn't be able to combine well with the light of the clan. He didn't expect the reality to be so different. If Nye Tion's cultivation had reached the Sky Martial Realm, he might even be able to combine with the light of the clan. If that was the case, it would be too terrifying. The light of the clan was the heart of an ancient saint venerable. However, Chao Qiqing was still calm and didn't let it get to his head. He was still worried that something was wrong with Nye Tion's martial body. Nye Tion took a deep breath and sensed his surroundings. He smiled and said, "Altar Protector, don't worry. I'm fine." But then, Nye Tion looked around and saw a dozen withered corpses. He suddenly thought of something and exclaimed, "They're the Altar Protectors." These withered corpses were the Altar Protectors who had helped Nye Tion combine with the light of the clan. Yes. Chao Qiqing nodded with a heavy expression. Guling Wuji stepped forward and said, helping the Beacon Emperor combine with the light of the clan was their mission. They did a good job. Nye Tion's face was gloomy, and he didn't say anything for a long time. He didn't expect that combining with the light of the clan would require such a heavy price. If he had known, he would have reconsidered. But things had come to this, and there was no turning back. All Nye Tion could do now was to protect the Fontian sect and not let their sacrifice be in vain. "Nye Tion, let's go," Guling Wuji said in a deep voice and turned around to lead the way. Nye Tion followed behind, while Chao Qiqing stayed behind to properly arrange the remains of the sacrificial altar guards. At the same time, in the sky above Sky Beacon Square, the wind was as sharp as a blade. The cloud was silent. The air was filled with a murderous aura that caused one to feel suffocated. Dugaji's eyes trembled slightly. He looked at the distant sky with worry in his heart. He had already guessed that Nye Tion would take extreme measures. At the same time, he had also seen some clues from Yuan Tianjili's reaction. However, he did not expect Nye Tion to personally fight against Yuan Tianjili. He had already seen through Nye Tion's cultivation with a single glance. No matter how talented Nye Tion was, he had at least reached the advanced Sky Martial state in order to fight against Yuan Tianjili. Dugu Qian had seen countless miraculous techniques in the world, but he couldn't think of any technique that could allow a cultivator in the first level of the Celestial Awakening realm to reach the high level of the Celestial Martial Arts realm. Moreover, even if Nye Tion had really reached the advanced Sky Martial state, Dugu Ji did not believe that he could fight against Yuan Tianjili. His master, Wan Jian, had lost to Yuan Tianjili when he was at his peak with Dihong. Dugu Qian even felt that even the legendary Heaven Dao Pavilion Master or the current human emperor who had been hiding behind the scenes might not be a match for Yuan Tianli. Yuan Tianjili was the most powerful among the three founding Li. Now that he had appeared, he was more powerful than the other powerful figures in the Eternal Abyss. On the other hand, Yuan Tianjili, although no one could see his expression, they could sense his excitement, as though he was looking forward to something. The surrounding crowd seemed to have guessed something amidst the oppressive atmosphere. They looked at the peak of the mountain with great anticipation. "He's here." Yuan Tianjili's gaze was sharp as he seemed to have sensed something and spoke in a deep voice. Just as he finished speaking, a figure descended from the sky like a meteor. It was as bright as a flame, and the holy light was like a torch. Nye Tion. When the crowd saw the holy light figure clearly, their eyes trembled violently, and they shouted a name at the same time. They could not believe that the figure was actually Nie Tian. However, at this moment, Nie Tian's aura was completely different from before. If the previous Nie Tian was a small stream, then he was now an endless ocean, giving off a feeling that one could not see the bottom. Everyone stared at Nie Tian, their hearts filled with shock. They even wondered if the person standing in front of them was really Nie Tian. An hour and a half ago, he was only a Heaven Awakening Stage 1 martial artist. Now he was at the peak. Was this really not a dream? The crowd could not be blamed. If this happened to anyone else, they would not believe it. Nie Tian, you did not disappoint me. At this moment, Yuan Tian Jili spoke. His tone was cold again, and, at the same time, it carried a strong sense of oppression. Du Guiqian took a glance at Nie Tian and secretly told him what he wanted to know. It turns out that your excellency is Yuan Tian Jili. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, and he asked directly, You killed Xiao Yang, the third deputy dean of the sacred religion, right? Just an ant. Yuan Tian Jili responded calmly, as if Xiao Yang was less than an ant in his eyes. So you was also taken away by your excellency? Nie Tian continued to ask. You should already know the identity of that girl. Yuan Tian Jili responded faintly. I don't want to be your enemy, but I didn't expect things to develop to this point. Primordialine. Nie Tian's eyes suddenly narrowed, and his heart sank. Bing Ji had guessed before that Su Yu was very likely to be one of the three principals, Primordialine, and now it was confirmed. No wonder Yuan Tian Jili personally appeared to take Su Yu away. There should be someone behind your excellency. Nie Tian calmed down a little and asked in a deep voice. Nie Tian and the Fengtian sect had no grudges with the Li clan, but the Li clan had always been targeting the Fengtian sect. Clearly, someone had instructed them to do so. It's just a deal. Yuan Tian responded indifferently. With your intelligence, you should have already known who was trying to harm the Fengtian sect. The Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion, the Human Emperor Palace. Nie Tian's eyes darkened, and he already had an answer in his heart. The Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion and the Human Emperor Palace had a grudge against Nie Tian, and this time selection had most likely touched the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion's nerves. In addition, the collapse of the heavens had made the seventh sacred cultivator world more and more important, so it was not surprising that the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion wanted to completely control the seventh sacred cultivator world. However, the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion would never have imagined that Nie Tian and the Fengtian sect tenacity was far beyond their imagination. Yuan Tian Jili should have made a deal with the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion or the Human Emperor Palace, and both sides were mutually beneficial. As for the Abyssal Ghoul race, they should have been implicated by the Li clan. If that's the case, Nie Tian would like to fight. Nie Tian gradually came to a realization. He knew that this battle was unavoidable, so he didn't waste any more words. He took a step forward, and his aura erupted as he asked for permission to fight. Chapter 45-56. High up in the sky, Nie Tian's aura erupted. The tyrannical aura shrouded the sky and filled the entire world with a strange bloodline qi. Now that he knew Yuan Tian Jili's purpose, this battle was unavoidable. He would fight with all his might. In the face of Nie Tian's strong request to fight, Yuan Tian Jili's body moved slightly. He seemed to feel something and said, Your aura is no weaker than the current peak powerhouses. I wonder how strong you are. I'll know after I try. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched coldly. In the next moment, his figure moved directly. He was as fast as lightning and rushed straight towards Yuan Tian Jili. Oh, interesting. Yuan Tian Jili felt Nie Tian's sharpness and naturally understood what the latter was going to do. He could not help but let out a faint smile. How could he not see that Nie Tian wanted to fight him with a pure martial body? This battle method was not only to show his opponent the strength of his martial body, but it was also a provocation. Yuan Tian Jili stood coldly in place and did not avoid it. He also wanted to see how strong Nie Tian was at the moment. Nie Tian's figure was like lightning. In an instant, he rushed over and was less than 5 meters away from Yuan Tian Jili. Bang! In the next moment, The two of them punched out at almost the same time. Their fists collided like a volcanic eruption. An incomparably tyrannical force exploded, directly causing the space within several meters to crack. A space-time storm rushed out and hit Nietian and Yuan-Tian Jili. However, the two seemed to feel nothing and did not retreat at all. Everyone gasped in unison when they saw this scene, and they were shocked to the point of being dumbstruck. Who would have thought that the two peak powerhouses would choose such a primitive and direct way to fight? Moreover, although the two of them were fighting directly with martial bodies, they were able to tear through the void with just their physical strength. One could imagine the strength of their strength. High up in the sky, the most direct martial body confrontation caused the two figures to sway at the same time. However, neither of them retreated. Instead, they moved to the side and attacked again. Bang! 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 The two of them were extremely fast and powerful. Terrifying sounds of collision could be heard continuously in the void. Suddenly, the space-time storm seemed to have erupted and frantically rushed out. However, when it hit the bodies of Nietian and Yuan-Tian Jili, it was like scratching an itch. Boom! A moment later, a massive space-time storm formed beside Nietian and Luo Yinyang. The space-time storm was like a giant dragon in the space, its aura violent. Everywhere it passed, space-time would be torn apart. Whoosh! High up in the sky, a huge space-time crack formed, and a space-time storm poured out like the Milky Way. Feeling the terrifying power coming from the sky, everyone's expression changed, and they all became panic-stricken. Once such a huge space-time storm gathered, it would form a space-time whirlpool, which was a power that could sweep everything. The strength of the space-time whirlpool was enough to swallow Nietian and Yuan-Tian Jili in an instant. At that time, the entire Sky Beacon Square and the people in the surrounding pavilions would not be able to escape. Once the space-time whirlpool swallowed enough power, it would form a super huge space-time whirlpool, and then a space-time black hole. And a space-time black hole was enough to swallow a sacred world. No one thought that the power of Nietian and Luo Yunyang was so strong that they could cause such a terrifying space-time storm. At the same time, in the huge space-time storm, Nietian's eyes were firm and murderous. There was not the slightest fluctuation of origin power around him, only the purest physical strength. It made his entire body swell up, and he became much taller. He did not expect that at the 9th level of the heaven realm, his martial body could be so strong. And Yuan-Tian Jili's martial body was also incomparably strong. The two of them fought for so long, but they did not show the slightest hint of exhaustion. Nietian originally thought that Yuan-Tian Jili's strongest should be the ghost chi in his body, but he did not expect the latter's martial body to be so strong. No wonder when the three evenly combined, they could compete with experts of Yu Sangqiong's level. Nietian punched continuously. Under the interference of the space-time storm, he could no longer see Yuan-Tian Jili's shadow, but he could feel the existence of the latter's aura. Yuan-Tian Jili was the same. He punched continuously, but every punch seemed to hit the hardest stone wall. Moreover, what shocked Yuan-Tian Jili was that Nietian's power did not weaken in the slightest, and it even faintly showed signs of becoming stronger. It should be known that the fight between their martial bodies seemed to be very easy, but every punch was enough to destroy a city or a mountain. If either of them was slightly weaker, they would definitely be seriously injured. With such a high intensity of power consumption, Nietian did not weaken in the slightest. The strength of his martial body had already exceeded the limits of a peak martial artist. It was too terrifying. Lord Beacon Emperor, if we continue to fight like this, the space-time whirlpool will swallow both of us. At that time, your Fengtian sect will not be able to survive. In the endless space-time storm, Yuan-Tian Jili spoke in a deep voice. Although it was cold, it carried a hint of weakness. Yuan-Tian Jili originally thought that after his rebirth, there should be very few people in the world who could rival him, but he did not expect to meet a monster like Nietian. However, He did not regret letting Nietion complete the heavenly beacon blood sacrifice. If this world was filled with a bunch of mediocre people, then wouldn't there be too much fun? Don't worry, the space-time whirlpool only swallowed you. As for the Fontion sect, it is not as weak as you think. Nietion sneered and took a deep breath. The aura around him became even more tyrannical. How could he not see that Yuan Tianjili was already a little timid? This was the best time for him to do so. At this time, the two were very close. Even if Yuan Tianjili wanted to use the ghost chi, it was definitely not in time. No matter how strong a martial artist was, if they wanted to use their Yuan power, they had to circulate it through their Yuan meridian, which required some time. However, it was different in a fight between martial bodies. One punch and one kick could be used to instantly subdue the enemy. At this time, if Yuan Tianjili wanted to use his Yuan power to escape, it was tantamount to suicide. With Nietion's ability, he could directly take Yuan Tianjili's life in an instant. Originally, Nietion only wanted to use their martial bodies to seriously injure Yuan Tianjili, but he did not expect to usher in an opportunity to win. It seemed that this battle was going more smoothly than he had expected. So overbearing, are you sure you have victory in your hands? Yuan Tianjili clearly did not expect Nietion to be so overbearing. He immediately spoke in a low voice and punched out fiercely, but it was as if he had punched an incomparably thick stone wall. Even so, Nietion was still forced to take a step back. You really are timid. Nietion stabilized his body, and a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Yuan Tianjili did not hesitate to injure himself to force him back. Clearly, his martial body had been injured. However, Nietion was different. Under the situation where he had the support of the 10th Yuan meridian, his physical strength had been maintained at its peak. Even as he became more and more closely integrated with the clan vein light, his strength was faintly showing signs of increasing. Now is the time. In the next moment, the corner of Nietion's mouth twitched coldly, and he punched out fiercely. The power of the surrounding time and space storm gathered on the tip of the fist, and its aura more than doubled, directly blasting towards Yuan Tianjili. If this punch hit, Yuan Tianjili's fate would be 9 out of 10. Chapter 45-57. One punch with all his strength. Nietion triggered the power of the surrounding space-time storm and exploded with a power that exceeded the limit, striking directly at Yuan Tianjili. The power of this punch, even if it did not contain any essence energy, was enough to destroy a large city's city protection array. Nietion thought to himself that even with the strength of his current martial body, if he were to withstand this punch, he would definitely be seriously injured. Although Yuan Tianjili's martial body was very strong, it was still weaker than Nietion's. He definitely could not withstand this punch. But the next moment, a strange scene happened. Nietion's punch landed, but there was no expected backlash. Instead, it seemed to hit the void like rain falling into the sea. It actually sank deeply. The punch missed. Could it be that Yuan Tianjili disappeared? But was this possible? Although Nietion could not see Yuan Tianjili's figure, both of them were trapped in the space-time storm. Even if Nietion wanted to rush out, he had to pay the price. At this time, if he wanted to walk out of the space-time storm unscathed, the two of them must stop and wait for the space-time storm to naturally weaken. Unless Yuan Tianjili disregarded everything and directly rushed out of the space-time storm. But if that was the case, he would also suffer extremely serious injuries. Lord Beacon Emperor, you can't really think that this is all I have, right? Just as Nietion was bewildered, Yuan Tianjili's voice resounded in the void, sneering and arrogant. Nietion immediately frowned. The other party was full of energy and his breathing was steady. Obviously, he was not injured, and judging from the source of the voice, Yuan Tianjili had already left the space-time storm. But how was this possible? What method did Yuan Tianjili use to let himself walk out of the space-time storm unscathed? Nietion's eyes dimmed. It seemed that he still underestimated Yuan Tianjili. Immediately, Nietion's palm surged with the chaotic flame, and the flame turned into a blade. He forcefully tore open a crack in the space-time storm, and his figure instantly leapt out. The moment he stood still, Nye Tian saw Yuan Tian Zhili standing coldly in the sky, completely unharmed. Oh, it's the flame of chaos. Yuan Tian Zhili did not expect Nye Tian to walk out of the space-time storm. He was slightly surprised and said, "It seems that you have a lot of good things on you. You relied on other means to walk out of the space-time storm unscathed, right?" Nye Tian moved and stepped into the sky as he sneered. The power of space-time is mysterious and unpredictable compared to other powers. When facing such a force that can't be controlled, I naturally won't take the risk myself. Yuan Tian Zhili replied indifferently, and his indifference revealed ridicule. Nye Tian could not help but frown. He instantly understood and said solemnly, "The one who fought with me just now was not your original body, but a clone. You can call it clone." Yuan Tian Zhili was still calm. As he spoke, he lifted the black robe and revealed his true face. It was a handsome young face. This face, in the eyes of Pang Run, was perhaps only about 20 years old, or even much younger than Nye Tian. Who could believe that the abyss taboo that dominated the world would have such an appearance? "Your Excellency, Beacon King, our battle has officially begun." The corner of Yuan Tian Zhili's mouth twitched. Although his tone was very cold, he was no longer a faceless black robe, but a handsome young man, giving people an indescribable strange feeling. "Good." Nye Tian's eyes slightly darkened. He turned his palm, and the sword in the sky clenched tightly. The sword essence around him rose, and majestic momentum roared between heaven and earth. After all, it is the power from the ancient holy venerable. Not only did it increase your martial arts cultivation, but also your swordsmanship realm has reached the peak. Yuan Tian Zhili actually knew what happened to Nye Tian, and he did not shy away from mentioning the ancient holy venerable. Indeed, the ancient holy venerable's heart, the light of the Fengtian sect, not only had Nye Tian's strength skyrocketed, but his swordsmanship realm had also reached the 9th level of Sword Martial Saint D-Fire. It was a pity that he had not yet reached the realm of human sword unity. From this, it could be seen that even the ancient holy venerable had his limits. Nye Tian's eyes involuntarily darkened. He did not expect that Yuan Tian Zhili even knew about the ancient holy venerable. And the matter of the ancient holy venerable was not told to Nye Tian by Guling Wuqi not long ago. It was estimated that Guling Wuqi had just learned about it not long ago. Yuan Tian Zhili had no connection with the Fengtian sect, but he knew the biggest secret of the Fengtian sect like the back of his hand. This was too strange. Could it be that Yuan Tian Zhili was a martial artist of the same era as the ancient holy venerable? But was this possible? It should be noted that the ancient holy venerable was in existence from the ancient continent era. If Yuan Tian Zhili was from the ancient era, wouldn't he also be an ancient saint? "Come on." Nye Tian's eyes darkened, and he shouted in a low voice. The sword within his body suddenly burst out. Its majestic momentum was unparalleled, and it shocked the surrounding heaven and earth. Yuan Tian Zhili frowned, and his body swayed slightly under the impact of this sword momentum. What a terrifying sword momentum! The surrounding people could feel the fluctuation of the sword while coming from the sky, and their expressions changed. No one had expected that Nye Tian's sword momentum could be so terrifying. Even the mountains in the distance were faintly shaking under the impact of the sword aura. "Very good." Yuan Tian Zhili's eyes focused, and he laughed instead of being angry. He said, "Although you have not reached the realm of human sword unity, your sword will is not weaker than those swordsmen who have become one with the sword. In fact, it is even stronger. If old Wan Jian had a sword will like yours in the past, I would have been the one who would have lost." Yuan Tian Zhili might not be a swordsman, but he knew that in the long history of martial arts, only 1 in a billion swordsmen could become one with the sword. Back then, the 10,000 swords geezer had only achieved unity with the sword in his later years. Once he achieved unity with the sword, the 10,000 Swords geezer went into hiding in the eternal abyss, so no one knew much about him. Nietian might have only reached the 9th tier of Saint D Fire with the help of external forces, but his sword will was stronger than that of an ordinary Saint D Fire swordsman. This surprised Yuan Tian Zhili greatly. Under normal circumstances, if a swordsman used external forces to reach the 9th tier of Saint D Fire by force, he would be slightly weaker than an ordinary Saint D Fire swordsman. But Niet Tian was stronger than a swordsman who had become one with the sword. The potential of his sword will was so high that it far surpassed those swordsmen who had reached the peak. My sword will is not limited to just this. Niet Tian's gaze was cold. He was like a sea of sword will. His sword will swept and whistled, forming a storm of sword will in the air. The fierce air spread out, and wherever it passed, fine space-time cracks appeared in the air. Just the power of the sword will itself was enough to tear the air. The strength of Niet Tian's sword will was beyond everyone's understanding. It was not an exaggeration to say that if an ordinary low-level saint ancestor of heaven martial arts got within 1,000 meters of Niet Tian, they would be torn to pieces by the sword will. Niet Tian, I have to admit that you have amazed me. Yuan Tian Zhili saw the space-time cracks spread out like threads towards him. He felt threatened, and his face became gloomy. He was no longer as calm as before. At that moment, he admitted that Niet Tian was qualified to be his opponent. Chapter 4558. High up in the sky, two figures stood coldly. The two peaks confronted each other, and the cliff stood thousands of feet high. Yuan Tian Zhili was shocked by Niet Tian's terror, but he was not angry. Instead, he laughed excitedly. In his memory, he had never felt so excited since the battle between the three great generals and the human emperor in the firmament. Sure enough, only a strong opponent could make him feel the meaning of living. Come on, let me see how far a person who has been recognized by the ancient holy venerable can go. Yuan Tian Zhili's eyes were cold, but there was a strange look in them, as if he was looking forward to something. As you wish. Niet Tian's eyes were gloomy, and he shouted in a low voice. The sword essence suddenly broke out, and the momentum was overwhelming, as if it was going to swallow everything. God-piercing sword. The sword was like the wind, and it went straight to Yuan Tian Zhili. In an instant, Yuan Tian Zhili felt the fierce momentum rushing toward him, and he could not help but frown. His body shook in the void, and he strangely retreated dozens of meters, easily avoiding the direct impact of the sword shadow. When Niet Tian saw this, he could not help but frown, and he was puzzled. He had seen many martial artists with fast body movements, but they could not be compared with Yuan Tian Zhili at all. Yuan Tian Zhili's body movement was so strange that it seemed to tear the void, and he was moving without time difference. Eight Baron sword. In the next moment, Niet Tian attacked again, and the sword essence surged like an endless beast tide, directly covering the space within 10,000 meters, so that Yuan Tian Zhili could not retreat. Very good. Yuan Tian Zhili's eyes narrowed slightly, and his big hand moved in the void, and suddenly turned into Yin and Yang Wuji, absorbing the impact of the sword essence rushing toward him. The tide of sword essence rushed over, but Yuan Tian Zhili stood in the air, unharmed. Niet Tian's face darkened again. He had never seen Yuan Tian Zhili's defensive technique before. It seemed to be invulnerable. Beacon Emperor, your sword will has already surpassed that of a swordsman who has become one with his sword, but unfortunately for you, you still can't break my yin-yang infinite. Yuan Tian Zhili's eyes shone brilliantly, as if he wanted to provoke Niet Tian so that he could see just what his limits were. Is that so? Niet Tianling laughed, but he felt a little uneasy. It had been a while since he had fused with the light of the clan, and he was starting to feel a little uncomfortable. Guling Wuji had said that when the light of the clan resonated with the martial artist, it would devour the martial artist's lifeline and cause irreparable damage to the lifeline. Although Niet Tian had the 10th meridian, his cultivation was too weak to withstand the light for too long. I have to end this quickly. Niet Tian secretly made up his mind. Suddenly, The sword will in his body erupted again. The demonic aura shot into the sky, as if a demon had descended from hell. The sharp sword chi tore through the endless void. Yuan Tian Jili felt the strange movement in the void, and his expression changed as he took a few steps back. He couldn't help but feel a little confused. The power he felt from Yetian seemed to be endless and limitless. In his life, he had met countless amazing geniuses. Those who had once dominated an era all had one thing in common, and that was their terrifying potential. But no matter how strong their potential was, there was a limit. But in Yetian, Yuan Tian Jili saw infinite potential. At the same time, the people on the Sky Beacon Square and the surrounding pavilions left one after another and retreated to the nearby gates. The battle between Yetian and Yuan Tian Jili was so terrifying that the Sky Beacon Square, which was protected by the formation, was on the verge of collapse. At this moment, the sword aura around Yetian's body surged again, far exceeding everyone's expectations. The power that Yetian displayed was so terrifying that it had subverted everyone's understanding of martial arts. It was unimaginable that someone who was only in the first stage of heaven enlightenment realm not long ago could explode with such terrifying power. There were even many who felt that Yetian could single-handedly suppress all the heavens. 12 heavenly sword array open. High up in the sky, Yetian shouted. Endless sword will rolled out and instantly spread in all directions. Boom, boom, boom. 12 heavenly sword pillars appeared, connecting the sky and the earth like a giant. The majestic power enveloped the void as if it was going to break through the clouds. Trapped in the sword array, Yuan Tian Jili suddenly felt that the space around him was filled with sword will. There was a strong pressure on him, making it difficult for him to breathe. His expression suddenly changed. This time, he really felt the pressure and threat. 9 limits of the starry sky, the extreme of chaos. At this moment, Yetian shouted. The sword in the sky streaked across the sky, and the sword will also rose to an unprecedented height. A sharp aura enveloped the world, and terrifying cracks appeared in the sky. Yuan Tian Jili could not help but frown, and his expression changed. He had never expected that Yetian would be able to do this. He could clearly see that Yetian had used 2 sword skills at the same time and had perfectly combined them. When one swordsmanship reached a certain level, it was normal for a swordsman to be able to use 2 sword skills at the same time. But it was very rare for someone like Yetian to use 2 sword skills at the same time. One was a sword array, and the other was a sword skill. Different sword skills meant different sword will. Moreover, the sword theory was also different and even contradicted each other. But Yetian could completely combine 2 sword will and 2 sword theories, and even the tacit understanding was almost perfect. This meant that his understanding of swordsmanship had reached the acme of perfection, even far exceeding some swordsmanship grandmasters. Yetian, it seems that I have indeed underestimated you. Yuan Tian Jili did not panic. Instead, he smiled faintly, and the chi of mixed yuan spread around him. Yin and yang were in his palms, and heaven and earth were one. Yin and yang wuji yuan tian tai. Boom! The world shook, and a terrifying aura rose around Yuan Tian Jili. Tai Chi turned into one, merging the power of heaven and earth, controlling the power of heaven and earth, and holding the power of heaven and earth. Bang! In the next moment, the sword shadow crashed down with a terrifying sound. At the center of the collision, a dazzling white circle of light appeared. It exploded with a bang and spread out in all directions, covering the entire area. Wah! The terrifying power was like a river bursting its banks, pouring down. Suddenly, cracks appeared in space-time, and the impact was destructive. The void suddenly fell into chaos. The sun and moon lost their light, and the universe lost its color. Down below, the Sky Beacon Square could not withstand such a terrifying aura. The great formation collapsed, the ground cracked, and the earth cracked. The chi of the earth rushed out, and rays of white light roared like wild dragons. It was incomparably terrifying. The surrounding peaks and mountains kept shaking, and the world collapsed. It was like the end of the world, and in the center of the most intense, blazing, and terrifying power, two figures did not move at all. Like two rocks in a storm, they were Nie Tian and Yuan Tian Jili. The ultimate battle, the battle of the peak. The next moment would be the moment to determine the winner. Chapter 45-59. High up in the sky, the violent impact caused the heavens and earth to sing mournfully. Nie Tian and Yuan Tian Jili were at the center of the impact, but neither of them stepped back. In a battle between the strong, life and death was decided in an instant. Everyone looked up at the chaotic sky and could not see Nie Tian or Yuan Tian Jili at all. They were shocked to the extreme. Who would have thought that two people with vastly different strengths could fight to such an extent? This battle was earth-shattering and shocked the world. It was destined to be an unforgettable battle between the emperors. After a long time, the chaotic aura weakened slightly, and the wild waves in the sky began to calm down. Bang! At that moment, a muffled sound was heard, and then a figure covered in blood flew out, leaving a trail of blood in the void, like a bloody rainbow. That is, everyone's eyes trembled violently, and they all exclaimed. They then saw clearly that the figure covered in blood was actually Yuan Tian Jili. Everyone was shocked to the extreme, and countless pairs of eyes trembled. They could not help but wonder if they had seen wrongly. How could the one who was defeated be Yuan Tian Jili? Although Nie Tian had shown strength that surpassed the common understanding of martial arts, his cultivation was limited after all. Even if he used a special method to increase his strength, it was impossible for him to defeat Yuan Tian Jili. Just as everyone was in shock, Nie Tian's figure appeared. Waves of sword will whistled out, directly tearing the wild waves, like a cold and sharp sword, standing tall in the sky. Nie Tian. When everyone saw Nie Tian's face clearly, many people exclaimed. On the surface, Nie Tian did not seem to be injured, and his aura was still very strong. Could it be that Nie Tian really won this battle? In the distance, on a high peak, two figures stood side by side, looking at Nie Tian from afar. It was Guling Wuqi and Chao Qiqing. Lord Beacon Emperor, did he win? Chao Qiqing's eyes were blazing, and he could feel the tremble in his voice. He was pleasantly surprised, but also a little confused. Chao Qiqing, who had witnessed the entire battle between Nie Tian and Yuan Tian Jili, was shocked beyond words. He knew that Nie Tian had reached the 9th level of the heaven realm with the help of the sect light. However, he only felt that under such circumstances, Nie Tian's battle prowess was only slightly stronger than an ordinary sacred ancestor in the 9th level of the sky martial arts realm. There was still a gap between him and a true peak expert. On the other hand, the power that Nie Tian displayed shocked him time and time again. Yuan Tian Jili's strength also shocked Chao Qiqing. Therefore, he was not sure whether Nie Tian had really won. Guling Wuji's eyes were like torches. The corner of his mouth twitched as if he wanted to say something, but he couldn't make a sound. He believed what his eyes saw, but there was a voice in his heart telling him that things were not that simple. Would the once invincible Yuan Tian Jili really lose to Nie Tian? Boom! At that moment, a terrifying aura suddenly exploded from the blood-soaked figure high in the sky. Blood chi filled the air, and a strange scene appeared. A layer of blood mist sprang up from Yuan Tian Jili's body. Then, like a cicada shedding its skin, the blood and flesh scattered, and in its place was a completely different body. Nie Tian's expression changed at the scene, and he was extremely surprised. He never thought that Yuan Tian Jili would have a technique that was close to nirvana. At that moment, Yuan Tian Jili's appearance was less handsome and more domineering. His face also seemed a lot older, and he looked like a middle-aged man who had experienced the vicissitudes of life. Beacon Emperor, you actually forced me to use my Yuan form. At that moment, Yuan Tian Jili opened his mouth. The aura around him suddenly shook, and it was majestic and mighty. It caused the wind and thunder to roar, and there was the image of a mad dragon. Tian's eyes suddenly darkened, and his body swayed a few times. He could not help but take a few steps back. After Tian Jili revealed his Yuan form, his aura actually increased by several times. The power that surged around him seemed to have the power to swallow the heavens. Could it be that Tian Jili was not injured at all? Or could it be that Tian Jili's Yuan form was relatively independent from its previous state? Everyone looked at the strange scene in the sky, shocked and confused. What the hell is going on? This guy is not injured at all? His appearance has changed. Looks like it was just a disguise. This is his real face. His aura has increased a lot. How can this person be so strong? Did Tian's sword just now have no effect on him? The crowd discussed in horror, and they looked at Tian Jili in disbelief. How is this possible? Chao Qiqing's face froze for a moment before he reacted. There was no longer any passion in his eyes, only shock and confusion. He clearly saw that Tian Jili was seriously injured. How did he change his appearance in the blink of an eye, and his aura actually increased so much? On the other hand, Guling Wuji did not look too shocked, but he was extremely worried. He had expected that it would not be so easy for Tian to defeat Tian Jili. However, he still did not expect that Tian Jili would have such an amazing skill. At the same time, high up in the sky, Yuan form, Tian became cold. He could already clearly feel the clan vein light devouring his life veins, but he still pretended to be calm and said in a deep voice, "It seems that this is your original appearance." The current Tian Jili reminded Tian of a person, the defiant demon Li Yuan. The defiant demon Li Yuan was one of the top experts that Tian had seen. At that time, Li Yuan used the deity 8 forms to suppress the young God Sword Emperor. His strength was so terrifying that it was unbelievable. Tian clearly remembered that Li Yuan's deity 8 forms had 8 forms: evil, ruthless, roar, brave, kill, lock, berserk, and violent. As for Tian Jili, he had also shown 2 forms. He did not know if this was related to Li Yuan's deity 8 forms. Moreover, their names were Tian Jili and the defiant demon Li Yuan. It sounded like they were related. However, Tian had a vague feeling that Tian Jili was an even more terrifying existence than the defiant demon Li Yuan. Until now, Tian Jili was far from revealing the limits of his power. Tian Jili smiled. He did not deny it, nor did he admit it. Instead, he said, "Tian, you should have reached your limit. That sword strike just now was your strongest strike, but it only forced me to use my primordial avatar. How do you plan to fight against me next? If you think that is my limit, you are underestimating me." However, Tian smiled coldly. The corners of his mouth curled into a cold smile, and his eyes were resolute. Although the one who was injured in that sword just now was Tian Jili on the surface, the one who was really at a disadvantage was Tian. After revealing his Yuan form, Tian Jili's external injuries were as good as new. In fact, he was even stronger than before. Tian, on the other hand, was suppressed by the light of the clan. His lifeline was damaged, his martial arts foundation weakened, and his internal injuries were severe. However, Tian was not afraid, and he would not retreat. This was because he knew that this battle was not for himself, but for the Fengtian sect, for the sacred world of 7 cultivators, and for the dignity of the ancient holy venerate. Is that so? Tian Jili sneered. He felt that Tian was bluffing. Tian's eyes were cold and murderous. The corners of his mouth curled up as he said 3 words, "Fiend God Body." Chapter 4560, Body of the Divine Demon. As these 3 powerful words were uttered, inverse marks of the divine demon appeared on Tian's face and instantly spread across his entire body. Boom! Suddenly, a surge of divine demon chi exploded. The huge impact caused the surrounding space to shake violently, as if the heavens and earth could not withstand this force. Tian Li could not help but frown when he sensed the energy ripples in the air. He immediately took a step forward and stabilized himself. He looked at Nie Tian with a strange expression. He did not expect the latter to hide his strength, but he knew that Nie Tian's current state would cause great damage to his life veins, and he would not be able to last long. Beacon Emperor, I did not expect you to go this far for this battle. Yuan Tianjili calmed down and said in a low voice, the current you is worthy of me going all out. Then bring it on. Nie Tian bellowed. The divine demon chi around him surged in all directions. Like a demon, he looked down on the world. Infinite yin and yang. 9 suns move the mountains and rivers. This time, Yuan Tianjili did not continue to defend. Instead, he chose to attack for the first time. His palms gathered yin and yang, absorbed the power of heaven and earth, and pressed down on Nie Tian with the power to swallow the mountains and rivers. Nie Tian's eyes darkened. The sword in the sky pierced through the air like a mad dragon. Wherever the sword pointed, yin and yang were broken. Yuan Tianjili felt a sharp aura rushing towards him. His eyes narrowed, and he retreated hastily. However, he was still one step too late. The moment the sword chi whizzed past, it left a glaring sword mark on his face. Yuan Tianjili steadied himself. Feeling the burning pain on his face, he could no longer remain calm. His face was so dark that it was almost dripping with water. His eyes were filled with murderous intent as he stared at Nie Tian, as if he wanted to skin the latter alive. This was the first time someone had left a sword mark on his face. Even the 10,000 swords geezer had only managed to injure him. Nie Tian, a warrior of the first level of the Sky Awakening realm, had left a sword mark on Yuan Tianjili's face. How could he not be angry? Are you angry? Nie Tian felt the murderous intent in Yuan Tianjili's eyes. His lips twitched, and he snickered to himself. That attack just now had been infused with an extremely sharp eye power. That was why he had managed to injure Yuan Tianjili. He wanted to infuriate Yuan Tian. Only in this way would he have a chance to win. Even Nie Tian wouldn't be able to bear the burden of activating his god-devil body under the pressure of the sect light. Nie Tian wouldn't be able to maintain his god-devil form for much longer. Furthermore, in such a state, the sect light's devouring of his life veins had already damaged his martial foundation. Even if he had to give it his all, Nie Tian had to win. I didn't think that after Imperial Firmament, there would still be someone who could force me to this extent. I didn't think that after Imperial Firmament, there would still be someone in this world who could force me to this extent. Yuan Tianjili's eyes were cold and dark. The ghostly aura around him intensified, and his murderous intent was overwhelming. Beacon Emperor, with this battle, regardless of the result, you will be able to laugh at the world. I will win this battle. Nie Tian raised his sword in the sky, unafraid of the ghostly aura. Wherever the sword will landed, it would destroy all evil. Is that so? Yuan Tianjili smirked and said in a low voice, it seems like my patience has boosted your confidence. Why talk so much? Let's just fight. Nie Tianling laughed as he slashed out with his sword in the sky. His fiend god was stimulated to its strongest state as he slashed out with his sword. 9 waves of sword chi appeared in the air, each stronger than the previous, blotting out the sky as they gushed towards Yuan Tianjili. Yuan Tian Taiji, Heavenly Ghost Scar. At the same time, Yuan Tianjili roared in a low voice. Both of his palms landed on the ground as a black scar appeared, breaking through the 9 layers of sword chi. In an instant, Nie Tian felt a wave of pressure bearing down on him. With a single thought, his astral soul shield materialized as he retreated 100 meters. However, he was still a step too slow. Nie Tian stabilized himself as a black scar appeared on his shoulder. It was actually able to suppress his fiend god chi. Sky-devouring ghost. And in the next instant, Yuan Tianjili didn't give Nie Tian any chance to catch his breath. With a low roar, he dashed over once again. Terrifying ghostly chi stirred the air as a gigantic ghost face manifested. Its might was so great that it felt as though the heavens and earth were collapsing as it bore down on Nie Tian. 9 limits of starry sky, sun annihilation. At this critical moment, Nie Tian roared as astral energy erupted from his body. Pointing his sword at the heavens, sword shadows whistled out, forcibly resisting the pressure of the ghost face. Bang! Up in the air, the two of them collided. Immense amounts of evil energy and astral energy gushed out in all directions, wreaking havoc in the air. A pair of astral soul wings appeared behind Niet Tian's back as he borrowed the momentum to retreat. Want to escape? Not so easy. Yuan Tian Zhili pursued relentlessly. Evidently, he didn't want to give Niet Tian any time to recover. His silhouette flickered several times in the air, directly appearing beside Niet Tian. Ghost Dragon Slaughter, Blood Luo, Calamity. Yuan Tian Zhili's eyes were cold to the extreme. With a low roar, a ghostly chi pierced through the air, directly transforming into a calamity seal, enveloping Niet Tian. Niet Tian couldn't help but frown. Astral energy surged in his palm as the soul-severing heavenly seal appeared once again. This time, the aura and might of the soul-severing heavenly seal were completely different. How could Niet Tian not see that Yuan Tian Zhili didn't want to kill him? Instead, he wanted to control him. It seemed like he had some ulterior motives, something that could tempt Yuan Tian Zhili. Niet Tian didn't think too much about it. It must be the heart of the ancient Saint Venerable, the light of the bloodline. Oh, Yuan Tian Zhili's eyes narrowed slightly. He couldn't help but be surprised. Niet Tian's methods had exceeded his expectations time and time again. Yuan Tian Tai Su, black and yellow return to one. Ghost flow, all phenomena. In the next moment, Yuan Tian Zhili used his ultimate move again. His palms were like heaven and earth, and yin and yang were released. A gust of mixed origin chi appeared, shrouding the void and imprisoning everything. At the same time, it was accompanied by an extremely strong, murderous force. Niet Tian's figure retreated rapidly, but he was shocked to find that the space suddenly became heavy. A huge pressure came from all directions, making it difficult for him to move. It's over. Seeing this, Yuan Tian Zhili shouted coldly. Several ghost blades attacked Niet Tian at the same time. Indeed, it's over. But Niet Tian was not afraid at all. Instead, the corners of his mouth pulled up into a strange smile. His eyes were as dark as the abyss. Suddenly, the surrounding atmosphere changed. Suddenly, the sun and the moon lost their light, and the world lost its color. It was as if they had fallen into an endless abyss. In an instant, Yuan Tian Zhili suddenly sensed something. His expression changed drastically, and he exclaimed in surprise. He hurriedly retreated, but he felt that the void around him was soft, as if he had fallen into a pool of weak water. He was unable to move. Yuan Tian Zhili, this time, do you still have a way to escape? In the endless darkness, Niet Tian's voice sounded like the tolling of a funeral bell, shaking Yuan Tian Zhili to the core. When did you set up this eye barrier? Yuan Tian Zhili's five senses were completely disabled. He could not sense anything around him at all. He could only rely on his most primitive instinct to growl. You have already fallen into my eye barrier since the first strike after I activated the celestial demon body. Niet Tian's voice rang out again, as if it had come from the abyss itself. With a hint of playfulness in his voice, he said, Now, let me try the new ability of the eyes of the devil and God. World Burial by 1,000 Cuts. Chapter 45-61. World Burial was the new ability of the pupils of the Fiend God. As it turned out, Niet Tian, who had reached the 9th level of the Sky Martial Realm, had not only improved his swordsmanship, but his Fiend God physique had also improved. The reason why Niet Tian didn't use his Fiend God physique and pupils of the Fiend God was because he knew that Yuan Tian Zhili was extremely cunning and difficult to deal with. He wanted to save his most stable killing move for last. At this moment, within the eye barrier, even if Yuan Tian Zhili had other forms, it would be useless. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. As soon as Niet Tian finished speaking, countless sharp eye blades appeared within the eye space, as if they had automatically appeared from the void. They filled the sky and tore everything apart. Yuan Tian Zhili felt the fierce aura rushing towards him. He almost subconsciously wanted to resist, but he found that all his power seemed to have been sealed. He couldn't use it at all. Moreover, he felt as if he had fallen into a pool of weak water. He couldn't move at all. Most terrifyingly, there was an invisible force in the surrounding space that tightly confined Yuan Tianjili, turning him into a live target. Poof, poof, poof. The next moment, thousands of eye blades fell, and the sound of flesh being torn apart was heard. It was really like a death by 1,000 cuts. In the blink of an eye, Yuan Tianjili's skin and flesh were all cut off, leaving only a body of white bones. Extreme demonic destruction seal. Even so, Nie Tian didn't relax. His demonic eye trembled, and a dark soul seal swept out, enveloping the body of white bones. It instantly contracted and shattered. Now it's really over. Nie Tian watched the body of white bones shatter and scatter into the air. Only then did he let out a long breath. His eyes dimmed, and the eye barrier disappeared. The moment the eye barrier disappeared, the sky became clear again. The sky was clear and vast. Apart from the smell of blood, everything seemed to have returned to normal. This! The crowd looked at Nie Tian in the sky and gasped. The shock in their hearts was indescribable. They did not know what had happened. They only saw the sky turn as dark as an abyss. Then, Nie Tian and Yuan Tianjili disappeared into the darkness. After that, time and space returned to normal. Nie Tian's figure appeared, but Yuan Tianjili was nowhere to be seen. Everyone's eyes trembled. They already had a guess in their hearts, but they didn't dare to believe it. That expert from the Li clan has disappeared. Could he have been killed by Nie Tian? Just now, when space and time fell into darkness, it seems to have something to do with Nie Tian's eyes. It seems that Nie Tian really won this battle. Nie Tian really won. This is unbelievable. The crowd discussed in low voices. They were extremely shocked. Nie Tian, who only had the cultivation of the first layer Heaven Awakening realm, had killed a top-tier martial artist. This was unbelievable. Until now, the crowd still didn't understand how Nie Tian's strength had suddenly become so strong. Master Beacon Emperor really won. Chao Qiqing, who was on the peak in the distance, felt like he was dreaming. His eyes were dull, and he was about to cry tears of joy. Nie Tian was too terrifying. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, Chao Qiqing would never have believed that someone in this world could utilize the power of the clan light to such an extent. Guling Wuji, who was standing to the side, was stunned for a long time. After he regained his senses, he didn't say anything and nodded heavily. Puff! However, at that moment, Nie Tian, who was high up in the sky, trembled and spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was as white as a sheet and looked extremely ugly. The pressure from the clan light was already extremely heavy to begin with. Now that he had forcefully activated the godly demonic body, the clan light's devouring power had increased by a few times. Furthermore, he had activated the eyes of the demon and god, allowing the devouring power of the clan light to reach its maximum. With so many layers of pressure, no matter how strong Nie Tian's martial body was, he couldn't withstand it. Nie Tian. Guling Wuji immediately came to Nie Tian's side and held on to Nie Tian when he noticed the change in Nie Tian's condition. Nie Tian's body swayed slightly. He didn't even have the strength to remain standing. Master Beacon Emperor, how are you feeling? Chao Qiqing arrived as well. He looked at Nie Tian nervously and asked, I'm fine. Nie Tian took a deep breath and tried to hold on. Hurry up and force the clan light out of your body. Chao Qiqing tried to sense Nie Tian's condition, but his aura was blocked by the clan light. I can't do it. Nie Tian's face was pale as he struggled to speak. He had already tried many times, but he couldn't force the clan light out of his body. It was as if the clan light had somehow merged with his martial body. It was very strange. Chao Qiqing and Guling Wuji looked at each other, both confused. Under normal circumstances, when Nie Tian's martial body couldn't withstand it, the clan light would automatically leave his body. However, Nie Tian had obviously reached his limit. He couldn't force the clan light out of his body. It was very strange. Is the clan light going to completely merge with Master Beacon Emperor? After a while, Chao Qiqing suddenly had a bold idea. Even he broke out in cold sweat. That's impossible. Guling Wuji's eyes darkened as he shook his head firmly. The clan light was the heart of the ancient Saint Venerable. It was almost impossible for it to merge with a martial artist. Normally, when a martial artist merged with a certain type of power, it was basically ownerless or mild. The clan light was the heart of the ancient Saint Venerable. It could be seen as a kind of bloodline power. In order to merge with the clan light, one would first have to face the rejection of the bloodline. This kind of resistance was extremely strong, enough to destroy any martial artist. Not to mention that Nie Tian wasn't related to the ancient Saint Venerable. Even if he was the descendant of the ancient Saint Venerable, after such a long time, his bloodline had diluted to almost nothing. Therefore, he couldn't merge with the clan light. Chao Chiching, let's work together and force the clan light out. Guling Wuji knew that if the clan light couldn't leave Nie Tian's body, it would devour the latter's lifeline. All right, Chao Chiching agreed. The two of them slapped their palms on Nie Tian's back at the same time. Suddenly, two powerful forces rushed into Nie Tian's body. Puff! Before Nie Tian could react, the clan light was forced out. The moment the clan light left his body, Nie Tian's face turned pale. His cheeks sunk in like a corpse. Master Beacon Emperor. Chao Chiching immediately held onto Nie Tian. When he sensed the latter's condition, his face suddenly changed. He could feel that Nie Tian's 9 lifelines were severely damaged. There were cracks all over them, and they were showing signs of collapsing. What was more serious was that he couldn't sense the 10th lifeline. Nie Tian's 10th lifeline had disappeared. Could it be that the 10th lifeline had been completely devoured by the clan light? At that moment, the void in front of Nie Tian and the other two trembled strangely. Immediately, a dark and fierce aura appeared. In the blink of an eye, it condensed into a human figure. Yuan Tian Jili. Chapter 4562. Yuan Tian Jili. The moment they saw the figure in front of them, Nie Tian, Guling Wuji, and Chao Chiching exclaimed at the same time. No one thought that Yuan Tian Jili was still alive. How is this possible? Nie Tian struggled to keep himself awake as he looked at the figure in front of him in disbelief. He destroyed Yuan Tian Jili's martial body with the world burial dismemberment, and then to prevent the latter's divine soul from escaping, he deliberately used the extreme demon annihilation seal to completely erase the power of his divine soul. But now Yuan Tian Jili was still alive. This was too unbelievable. Why, Beacon Emperor, do you think it's impossible for me to still be alive? Yuan Tian Jili's eyes were extremely cold as he stared at Nie Tian with extreme resentment. It's impossible for you to still be alive. Nie Tian's eyes were cold as he said in a heavy tone. He did not believe that anyone in this world could still survive in a situation where both their body and soul were destroyed. Is that so? Yuan Tian Jili sneered and said, You did destroy my martial body and divine soul, but my original soul is immortal. Original soul? Nie Tian's eyes trembled violently in disbelief. Of course, he could see that Yuan Tian Jili did not have a physical body at this time. It seemed to be just a fierce aura, but there was still the aura of his divine soul, proving that his divine consciousness was still there. Nie Tian did not understand what Yuan Tian Jili meant by original soul, but he speculated that it should be a kind of power similar to the divine soul, but not the divine soul. Yuan Tian Jili, in this original soul state, you have no combat power at all. So what if you're not dead? At this time, Guling Wuji also calmed down and smiled coldly. Yuan Tian Jili ignored Guling Wuji and stared at Nie Tian. Beacon Emperor, I didn't expect your strength to be so terrifying just by relying on the heart of an ancient holy venerable. I wholeheartedly accept my defeat in your hands. However, I must warn you that the enemy you are facing is far more powerful than you think. Are you talking about the human emperor palace? Nie Tian narrowed his eyes and asked in a deep voice. He had long guessed that the one who made the deal with Yuan Tian Jili must be the human emperor's palace. However, Yuan Tian Jili had never admitted it directly, which made him a little uncertain. Yuan Tian Jili smiled with a strange expression. He said, "It's indeed the human emperor palace that I traded with, but it's not the one you saw. The human emperor's palace is like an iceberg. What appears in front of the world is just the tip of the iceberg. The true colossus lies in the abyss that the world will never see." "What do you mean?" Nye Tian's expression changed when he heard Yuan Tian's words, and he couldn't help but ask. He had already witnessed how powerful the human emperor palace was. It was a massive organization that exceeded his imagination. However, according to Yuan Tianjili, it seemed like the human emperor that Nye Tian saw was not the entire human emperor palace, but an extremely small part of it. Let me put it this way. The master of the human emperor palace that you know is the current human emperor, but he's just a small fry in the real human emperor palace. Yuan Tianjili smiled again and said calmly, "How was that possible?" Nye Tian frowned, not believing Yuan Tianjili at all. Since the human emperor was the master of the human emperor palace, how could he be a small fry? That was contradictory in itself, and it was more like lying to a 3-year-old. "Beacon Emperor, I see the shadow of Yu Tsangqiang in you." However, Yuan Tianjili ignored Nye Tian's doubts and said solemnly with a solemn expression, "I dare to say that you'll be the next human emperor." Nye Tian's frown deepened with a puzzled expression. The human emperor palace had already become his greatest enemy. How could he be the next human emperor? Furthermore, Nye Tian had already seen the young human emperor Lin Fan in the Yellow Springs sacred ground previously. That man was the one that the human emperor palace acknowledged as the next human emperor. Yuan Tianjili's words were way too strange that Nye Tian could not make heads or tails of it. "Nye Tian, we'll meet again." However, Yuan Tianjili did not give Nye Tian any time to think. With that final sentence, he vanished into the void in a flash. Nye Tian could not help but feel a little lost and could not speak for a long time. "Beacon Emperor, are you all right?" After a while, Chao Qiqing broke the silence. Evidently, he was also shocked by Yuan Tianjili's words. He suddenly recalled Nye Tian's condition and asked nervously, "I'm fine." Nye Tian tried his best to hold on, but his face was as ugly as a corpse's. "Chao Qiqing, bring Beacon Emperor back to treat his injuries first. Leave this to me." Guling Wuji could tell that Nye Tian was severely injured and said immediately, Chao Qiqing agreed and immediately left with Nye Tian. Only Guling Wuji was left high up in the sky. He glanced at everyone and looked at the sky beacon square that had long been in ruins. He did not speak for a long time. Everyone looked at Guling Wuji in shock. There was silence. No one had expected that this unexpected battle would actually develop into the current situation. The battle between the 9 people on both sides was getting more and more exciting. Especially the last few people, their strength was already close to the peak of all heaven's experts. Even the strength displayed by Nye Tian and Yuan Tianjili was already at the peak of all heaven's experts. There was no doubt that after today, the names Nye Tian and Yuan Tianjili would spread across the all heavens. As for the sky beacon selection, it seemed to be completely unimportant in the current situation. Everyone, the Fengtian sect has already given you an explanation. Next, those who are unwilling to participate in the sky beacon selection can leave directly. As for those who are willing to stay, they must abide by all the arrangements of the Fengtian sect. At this moment, Guling Wuji spoke with a deep and undisguised toughness. Since the Fengtian sect had displayed their strength to resist everyone, there was no longer any need to compromise. Guling Wuji also realized that the sky beacon selection was not important. To the entire Fengtian sect, the most important person was Nye Tian. As long as Nye Tian grew, the Fengtian sect would definitely rise. I am willing to abide by the Fengtian sect's arrangements. As soon as Guling Wuji's voice fell, the entire place fell into a dead silence before someone shouted, "I am willing." "Me too. Me too." Very quickly, everyone expressed their willingness to abide by the Fengtian sect's arrangements. In the battle earlier, the Fengtian sect had displayed unimaginable strength, especially the Beacon Emperor Nye Tian's unparalleled strength, which was enough to suppress the all heavens. With such a Beacon Emperor, Why would the Fengtian sect worry about not rising? Guling Wuji had long expected this outcome. He waved his hand to signal for everyone to be quiet and said loudly, "Since everyone is willing to abide by the Fengtian sect's arrangements, please go back first. We will make other arrangements in 3 days." Everyone agreed and left one after another. Not long after, most of them had left. Guling Wuji waited for everyone to leave and instructed a few hall masters to clean up the mess before leaving in a hurry. He had to quickly check on Nie Tian's condition and determine the extent of the latter's damage as soon as possible. Chapter 4563. His eyelids were very heavy, as if he had to use all his strength to open his eyes. But in the end, Nie Tian still slowly opened his eyes, and the first thing that came into view was a very familiar face. Rushi. As his eyes opened, the face gradually became clear. The corners of Nie Tian's mouth twitched violently, and he trembled as he said name. Mo Rushi. The face in front of him had exquisite facial features and was incomparably beautiful, like a snow lotus. It was clearly Mo Rushi. In an instant, as if a lifetime had passed, Nie Tian had an illusion that he had returned to his youth, back to the moment when he first met Mo Rushi in Moyang City. Nie Tian, you're finally awake. The woman in front of him seemed a little nervous when she saw that Nie Tian had woken up, but she was also very happy and excited. Her beautiful eyes were a little moist, and her voice was also trembling slightly. Rushi, it's really you. At this moment, Nie Tian finally confirmed that he was not dreaming. He almost subconsciously sat up and hugged the person in front of him tightly. Mo Rushi leaned on Nie Tian's shoulder as she finally could not hold back the tears in her eyes. Do you know that the exquisite dice and Hongdo, the deep yearning for you, after such a long separation, perhaps it was for this moment that her eyes were brimming with tears. After a long time, the two figures slowly separated, looked at each other for a long time, and suddenly smiled through their tears at the same time. Nie Tian, how do you feel? Mo Rushi suddenly remembered that Nie Tian had just woken up from a dream, and she could not help but ask nervously. I'm fine. Nie Tian had just reacted when he suddenly felt a tearing pain all over his body. It was as if there were countless tearing forces inside his body, causing his entire body to be in a state of being on the verge of collapse. However, he still endured the pain and shook his head indifferently. I'll go find Grandmaster Qing Chi right away. At this moment, Mo Rushi suddenly thought of something, and she screamed and hurriedly rushed out. Nie Tian looked at the somewhat flustered figure, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly, and a surge of warmth surged in his heart. A moment later, Mo Rushi returned with Qing Chi and Guling Wuji. Nie Tian, you're finally awake. Qing Chi quickly stepped forward, his eyes sweeping over Nie Tian, and at the same time, he used his divine sense to sense the latter's condition. Did I sleep long? Nie Tian found it strange that everyone was so surprised to see him awake. He couldn't help but ask with a wry smile. The last thing he remembered before he fell into a coma was Chao Qiqing bringing him back to his room. After that, he couldn't remember anything else. In his opinion, he should have been unconscious for about half a day. Moreover, while he was unconscious, he didn't feel anything. He didn't even have a dream. You've been unconscious for half a month. Qing Chi confirmed that Nie Tian's aura was still stable. Although the power in his body was still rushing, it was already within a controllable range. Only then did he heave a sigh of relief and said with a dry smile, "Half a month." Nie Tian was shocked and immediately froze. Never in his wildest dreams did he imagine that he would unknowingly sleep for half a month. Rushi, when did you come? Immediately, Nie Tian thought of something and looked at Mo Rushi and asked, She came not long after you were in a coma. For the past half a month, she has been by your side, not leaving your side. Before Mo Rushi could speak, Guling Wuji answered for her. Nie Tian's expression froze. He suddenly felt as if his heart had been pinched hard by someone, and it was extremely painful. Originally, he owed Mo Rushi too much, but the latter still stayed by his side, which made him feel even more guilty. It's good that you're fine. Mo Rushi, on the other hand, smiled gently. Then, Qing Chi and Guling Wuji each examined Nye Tian, and their faces didn't look too good. Seniors, is Nye Tian okay? Mo Rushi saw the expressions of the two, and her heart couldn't help but tighten, and she asked nervously. Nye Tian also frowned, but his heart was very calm. In fact, he had already sensed his body, and he had a basic understanding of his body's condition. Nye Tian, this time when you performed the heavenly beacon blood sacrifice, your lifeline was seriously damaged by the light of the clan. There was even a time when your body and soul were separated. Qing Chi let out a long breath and said, "Before you woke up, Gu Ling and I had already prepared for the worst." Prepared for the worst? Are you saying that I might never wake up? Nye Tian's eyes darkened, and he asked in astonishment. Yes. Qing Chi nodded and said, "The damage to your lifeline is too serious, and it has far exceeded the lifeline's own recovery ability. What's more troublesome is that you." At this point, Qing Chi's face sank, and he was somewhat speechless. My 10th lifeline has been completely devoured, right? Nye Tian, however, smiled and spoke for Qing Chi. Qing Chi and Guling Wuji's expressions froze at the same time, and they couldn't help but look at each other. Obviously, they didn't expect that Nye Tian's reaction to this matter would be so indifferent. The 10th lifeline, the ultimate secret of fate, and the most powerful lifeline in the world. With the 10th lifeline, Nye Tian almost had an immortal body. As long as he didn't receive a fatal blow, the 10th lifeline could be healed in a very short amount of time. Moreover, the 10th lifeline also gave Nye Tian an almost inexhaustible amount of power, and he could continue to fight without stopping. With such power, as long as Nye Tian grew up, he would be invincible. However, Nye Tian didn't seem to care at all after losing the 10th lifeline. This was really out of Qing Chi and Gu Ling Wuji's expectations. I obtained the 10th lifeline by chance, and it saved me many times in crucial moments. Nye Tian looked at the two and smiled, and he said, "The 10th lifeline was obtained by the first Beacon Emperor, and now that it has been devoured by the light of the clan, it can be considered as returning to its rightful owner. The 10th lifeline is indeed very important to me, but it is not so important that I can't do without it. Plus, I have confidence in myself. Even without the 10th lifeline, I can still reach the peak." His words were light, but they were full of confidence and confidence. Everyone here couldn't help but be moved. Qing Chi and Gu Ling Wuji glanced at each other again and smiled. It seemed like they had thought too much and underestimated Nye Tian's heart. Don't be happy when you get it. Don't be sad when you lose it. Nye Tian's talent was extraordinary, and he had such a state of mind. He will definitely achieve great things. Nye Tian, even though your 10th life meridian has been devoured, it's also because of this that your other 9 life meridians, although severely damaged, aren't fundamentally harmed. They just need some time to recover. Qing Chi smiled and said with a comforting tone. Nye Tian nodded slightly and smiled as well. He had already sensed it before. Although his 9 lifelines were heavily damaged, they were all recoverable, so it was not bad. The 10th lifeline was equivalent to sacrificing himself to protect the other 9 lifelines at the cost of being devoured. Even Nye Tian's martial arts foundation was not greatly affected. He could basically recover to normal. Senior Guling, have Devil's Knight and faction leader Lung returned? At this moment, Nye Tian suddenly remembered that he had been unconscious for half a month. Devil's Knight and Lung Shuang Wuchen should have returned, so he couldn't help but ask. However, Guling Wuji's expression darkened. He frowned deeply and did not answer for a long time. Chapter 4564. They're not back yet. Nye Tian's heart sank when he saw Guling Wuji's solemn expression. Yes. Guling Wuji nodded and said worriedly, "The Beacon's Emperor and faction leader Lung should have returned long ago, but there's still no news of them. They must have been delayed by something." Nye Tian frowned. Even though Guling Wuji was very tactful, he could still hear the seriousness of the situation. When Devil's Knight and Lung Shuang Wuchen left, it was the most crucial moment of the Sky Beacon selection. They should have returned as soon as possible if they were done with their business. However, they had not returned yet. Clearly, they were in trouble. Nietian, you don't have to worry. The Beacon's Emperor and faction leader Lung are both outstanding people. They will definitely return safely. Guling Wuji could see that Nietian was worried and comforted him. I hope so. Nietian nodded, a helpless expression on his face. It was useless for him to worry. He could only hope that Devil's Knight and Lung Shuang Wuchen could solve the problem in time. How's the Sky Beacon selection going? Nietian looked at Guling Wuji and continued to ask. He had been in a coma for half a month. If the Sky Beacon selection went well, it should have entered the final stage by now. The Sky Beacon selection went well. It ended yesterday. Guling Wuji finally smiled when he heard Nietian ask about the Sky Beacon selection. It ended. Nietian, however, was taken aback. He did not expect the Sky Beacon selection to end so early. Yes. Guling Wuji nodded and explained, after the big battle half a month ago, only half of the original number of martial artists remained to participate in the selection. After that, we made a selection of those who remained. Some of the disciples of the aristocratic families, martial artists who originally belonged to sects, and those who were slightly less talented directly left. There were only about 10,000 martial artists who participated in the martial arts selection and the final selection. To ensure that everything went smoothly, no spectators were allowed to be present during the martial arts selection and the final selection. As a result, the Sky Beacon selection progressed much faster and ended earlier. That's good too. The Fengtian sect is indeed not suitable to recruit too many new disciples at once. Nietian nodded in agreement with Guling Wuji's actions. Compared to the end of the Fengtian selection, what surprised Nietian even more was that the Human Emperor's Palace and the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion did not come looking for trouble. Then, Guling Wuji told Nietian some other things before leaving with Qing Qi. Only Nietian and Mo Rushi were left in the room. Rushi, did you come alone this time? Nietian asked with a smile as he looked at Mo Rushi with a gleam in his eyes. Senior Scarlet Life sent someone to bring me here. Mo Rushi did not react for a moment and nodded in reply. I mean, is it just you? Nietian smiled again and asked in a serious tone. Mo Rushi was stunned at first, but she immediately understood. However, a hint of worry flashed across her face. She then smiled and said, You want to ask about Fanner, right? Fanner, Nietian murmured and said, So that's our child's name? Yes. Mo Rushi nodded and said, I hope that his name will be ordinary, so I named him Niefan. Nietian nodded deeply, but there was an inexplicable pain in his heart. How could he not understand Mo Rushi's thoughts? However, how could he escape from everything in this world? It might not be difficult for an ordinary person to live an ordinary life, but it was the most difficult thing for a cultivator. Even if Mo Rushi named her son Niefan, how could he be ordinary? Mo Rushi had experienced too much, so she hoped that her child would be ordinary. But unfortunately, the word ordinary could only be her wish. Is Fanner here? Nietian's eyes trembled and he asked anxiously. He's with Senior Scarlet Fate and can't leave for the time being. Mo Rushi frowned slightly, but then she smiled and said, He's already 6 years old and has been cultivating with Senior Scarlet Fate, so he can't come. 6 years old. Nietian's eyes narrowed slightly. He couldn't help but outline a tender face in his mind, and a warm smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. However, the next moment, Nietian frowned, as if he had realized something. He looked at Mo Rushi and asked in a deep voice, Is Fanner okay? You can see it. Mo Rushi was stunned again and silently admitted. Rushi, what's wrong with Fan? Nietian's eyes suddenly narrowed, and he directly stood up despite the sharp pain all over his body. Just now, he had already noticed that Mo Rushi's words were a little evasive, and there was always a lingering worry between her brows. In addition, Mo Rushi said that Niefan couldn't come because he had to cultivate, which was really a far-fetched reason. Nietian and Niefan had never seen each other before. Since Mo Rushi came, he naturally should come with her. There was only one reason why Niefan didn't come, and that was that his body was abnormal. Nietian, I actually came to find you this time because of Fan-er. Mo Rushi knew that she couldn't hide it anymore and could only sigh. Her eyes were a little wet as she said, Fan-er is afraid. Seeing Mo Rushi hesitating, Nietian hurriedly asked. At this time, he already had a bad premonition in his heart, and beads of sweat directly oozed from his forehead. I'm afraid his life is in danger. Mo Rushi finally said it, and tears silently fell from the corner of her eyes. What's going on? Nietian's face stiffened, but he had to force himself to calm down and asked solemnly. Mo Rushi suppressed the grief in her heart and slightly calmed her mood. Then she said when Fan-er was born, his body was full of runes like seals, and his body was very weak. Senior Scarlet Life found many people to treat him, but there was no improvement. After that, Senior Scarlet Life took Fan-er to cultivate, and as Fan-er's cultivation continued to improve, his body also became much stronger. But a month ago, the seals on Fan-er's body suddenly acted up. First, his skin cracked, and the wounds couldn't heal. After that, his whole body started to fester, and his whole body exuded a very pungent corpse aura. Senior Scarlet Life invited many sane alchemists, but no one could find the cause of Fan-er's illness. He could only let Fan-er take some pills every day and rely on Senior Scarlet Life to personally suppress it. Only then was he able to barely maintain his life. At this point, Mo Rushi's tears fell again. No one could understand the heartache she felt when she saw her own child suffer that kind of inhumane torture every day. Nietian's face was cold and solemn, and his whole body stood stiffly, as if his heart was tightly gripped by an invisible hand. For so many years, Mo Rushi and Niefan had experienced everything, but Nietian was never there. And when Mo Rushi helplessly came to find Nietian, he was unconscious. Not only could he not help, but he even became a burden. Nietian was not a good husband, let alone a qualified father. Chapter 45-65. Nietian's heart ached, and he felt guilty. He stood there in a daze and did not speak for a long time. Nietian, Mo Rushi called softly. Although she was trying hard to hold back her tears, they still fell silently. Let's go back now. Nietian suddenly raised his head and looked at Mo Rushi with a heavy expression. Go back. Then this place. Mo Rushi was stunned at first, and then she looked embarrassed. She had been in the Fontian sect for half a month and had a general understanding of the situation here. She knew Nietian's identity and responsibilities at this time. Although the Sky Beacon selection was over, the Fontian sect still had a lot of things to deal with. As the Beacon Emperor, it was indeed not appropriate for Nietian to leave at this time. The Guling Sect Master and Senior Qing Chi are here. They will understand me. Nietian's eyes were slightly gloomy, and his eyes were full of unquestionable determination. For so many years, he owed Mo Rushi and her son too much, and it was time to make up for it. In any case, no matter what price he had to pay, Nietian must save his son. Nietian. But right at this moment, little Fat Cat's voice rang out, and its figure appeared, causing Mo Rushi to be taken aback. Fat! Nietian saw that Fat Cat's expression was a little strange, and immediately guessed that the latter should know something about Niefan. He could not help but tremble. Calm down first. Even if you go back now, you can't help that child. Fat Cat's face was a little gloomy, and she motioned Nietian not to be too excited. Fat, do you already know about Fan-er's situation? Nietian was even more anxious and asked nervously. Fat Cat had already grown 9 tails, so it was not surprising that she knew everything. Nietian guessed that Fat Cat must have heard something from Mo Rushi's description just now. The Fat Cat nodded solemnly, paused for a moment, and then said, If I'm not wrong, that child should have a body of 10,000 calamities. Body of all calamities? Nietian and Mo Rushi's expressions changed at the same time, and they both exclaimed in shock. Yes. The Fat Cat nodded heavily and said, The body of all disasters is a kind of congenital martial body. It is also a kind of bloodline power, but it is a forbidden body of heaven and earth. What do you mean? Nietian suppressed the shock in his heart and asked anxiously. The taboo body of heaven and earth sounded like an existence that could not be tolerated by the heavens. I don't have many detailed memories regarding this. I only vaguely remember that the myriad world's body originated from a powerhouse from the primordial era. The fat cat frowned and said, Guling Wuchi told you about the ancient holy venerables before. I'm guessing that the expert from the primordial era should also be an ancient holy venerable. You're saying that the myriad world body came from one of the 9 ancient saint venerables? Nietian couldn't help but be stunned, and his face was full of astonishment. The 9 ancient saint venerables were powerhouses from the primordial era. How could they be related to Niefan? Moreover, the body of all disasters was the power of bloodline. If the body of all disasters came from that ancient saint venerable, then wouldn't it mean that Niefan had a bloodline inheritance with that ancient saint venerable? If that was the case, then it meant that Nietian's ancestor from the primordial era was an ancient saint venerable. Yes. The fat cat nodded heavily and said, This is only my guess. The 9-tailed chinchilla clan also appeared in the later period of the primordial era, so the memories before that are uncertain. The 9-tailed chinchilla clan's bloodline power was the inheritance of memories. However, even if the fat cat grew 9 tails and awakened all the memories of the chinchilla clan, it was not omniscient. Because the 9-tailed chinchilla clan only appeared in the later period of the primordial era, the chinchilla clan didn't have any memories before that. At most, they only had some information from other sources. Since the body of all disasters is the power of bloodline, why didn't Fanner become stronger? Instead, his life is in danger? Nietian didn't think too much about it. At this time, his mind was only focused on saving people, so he hurriedly asked, Rumor has it that the body of all disasters is the forbidden power of heaven and earth, a power that could destroy the world. That ancient saint venerable cultivated a kind of forbidden cultivation method and finally cultivated the body of all disasters. The fat cat's eyes slightly narrowed as she said, And your son, Niefan, has the body of all disasters innate, which is stronger than the body of all disasters acquired. Those who have the body of all disasters are covered with the seal of all disasters. This is a power that ordinary people simply can't bear. Moreover, as the cultivator's body becomes stronger, the seal of all disasters will also become stronger. The reason why the child's life is in danger is that his martial body can't bear the power of the seal of all disasters. Nietian's face darkened, and he fell into silence for a while. He empathized with what the fat cat said. When he first awakened the godly demon body, his martial body also couldn't bear it. Every time he awakened it, he had to pay a considerable price. Niefan's seal of all disasters must be more terrifying than the godly demon body, but Niefan was far less powerful than Nietian. From this, it could be imagined how much pain Niefan was suffering every day. How can I save him? After a while, Nietian became cold. After a long time, he looked at the fat cat and said in a deep voice, It is said that the body of all disasters needs to go through 3 awakenings. During each awakening, one has to bear the human tribulation, earth tribulation, and heaven tribulation. The fat cat let out a long breath and said, What the child is experiencing now should be the first human tribulation awakening. Nietian's eyes trembled as he stared at the fat cat. When the human tribulation awakens, the child has to bear the extremely terrifying power of the human tribulation. The fat cat continued, This level of power can only be withstood by a martial artist at the level of Saint Emperor Tianhe. Is there any way to resolve the power of the human tribulation? Nietian asked directly with his heart in his throat. No. The fat cat shook her head and said, The power of the human tribulation comes from the body of all disasters. It can't be resolved or transferred. It can only be borne by the awakened. Then what should we do? Nietian's eyes trembled as he asked anxiously. The only way is to improve the awakened's endurance. The fat cat said as she glanced at Nietian and said with pity, If you still have the 10th vital vein, with the power of the 10th vital vein, you can improve the child's martial body to the level where it can withstand the power of the human tribulation. What a pity. The 10th vital vein was the ultimate secret of the fate chart. It contained the purest and most essential life force. It was the most suitable to improve a martial artist's physique. But unfortunately, Nietian lost the 10th vital vein because of the heavenly blood sacrifice. There must be another way, right? Nietan, however, did not feel much regret and continued to speak. There is no other way. The fat cat frowned and shook her head helplessly. Based on his current knowledge, he really could not think of any other way to improve a martial artist's physique to that level. Impossible, impossible. There must be another way. Nietian's pupils shrank, and he shook his head as if he had lost his soul. He did not want to admit the fat cat's words. How could he believe that his son could not be cured? Chapter 45-66. In the room, Nietian quickly calmed down. However, the atmosphere was deathly silent and oppressive to the point of suffocation. Emo Rushi understood the gravity of the situation. Although she was holding on, tears still fell from her eyes. Fat, is it true that only the 10th vein can save little Fan? After a long time, Nietian suddenly spoke. His eyes were so gloomy that it made people shudder. It was as if he had made a great decision. Nietian, what do you want to do? Little fat cat's face changed as it asked in shock. He felt that Nietian was about to do something crazy. I want to take back the 10th vein from the lineage's light. Nietian's eyes flickered as he said seriously. Take it back. Little fat cat was shocked, its face full of surprise. The 10th vein had been devoured by the lineage's light. How could he take it back? If the lineage's light can devour the 10th vein, then there must be a way to take it back. Nietian's eyes were firm. As he spoke, he was about to rush out. I'm going to find Senior Guling. Nietian, calm down first. However, Fat Cat stopped Nietian. He frowned and said, the lineage's light is the ancient Saint Venerable's heart. The reason why it can maintain its active state is because it has devoured the life vein's power. What do you mean? Nietian was stunned. He didn't understand what Fat Cat meant. He thought that the lineage's light had been active because the ancient Saint Venerable's heart was strong. However, Fat Cat seemed to be saying that the lineage's light had been devouring the life vein's power. Fat Cat hesitated and said, actually, when you were preparing for the heavenly blood sacrifice, I noticed that there was something wrong with the lineage's light. I wanted to stop you, but I had already made up my mind to carry out the heavenly blood sacrifice. With your personality, you wouldn't give up no matter what I said. I can see that the light of the clan contains an extremely large amount of lifeline power. It seems to have devoured many people's lifeline power. Therefore, I'm guessing that the Fengtian sect has been allowing the lineage's light to devour the power of the lifelines in order to keep the lineage's light active. Nietian's face sank. After a moment of silence, he said in a cold tone, you mean that the Fengtian sect has been using the lifelines of martial artists to feed the sect light? Using a martial artist's lifeline to feed the sect's light. This was simply a human blood sacrifice. Could it be that the Fengtian sect had been doing this all along? Yes. Fat Cat knew what Nietian was thinking, but she still nodded solemnly. I want to see the Guling sect master. Nietian found it hard to believe. He wanted to rush out, but he suddenly felt his chi and blood surging. His face turned red, and there was an explosive force in his chest, as if it wanted to rush out of his body. His whole body swayed violently, and he could no longer stand and fell down. Nietian. Emo Rushi quickly reached out to support Nietian. She was extremely nervous. I'm fine. Nietian took a deep breath, and his complexion improved a little. He struggled to support his body and said, Nietian, your lifeline is seriously injured. It will take at least 10 days to recover. Fat Cat signaled Nietian to calm down, then looked at Emo Rushi and said, little girl, go and find Guling old man, yes. Emo Rushi was very worried about Nietian, but the latter also nodded, so she could only agree and turn to leave. Nietian calmed down a little and sat on the chair next to him. There was a sharp pain all over his body. After a while, Emo Rushi returned, followed by Guling Wuji. Nietian, what's the matter? Guling Wuji felt that the atmosphere was a little gloomy. He didn't know what happened, so he asked cautiously. Nie Tian didn't avoid it and directly told him fat cat speculation. Guling Wuji wasn't too surprised after listening to Nie Tian's words, but his expression was slightly ugly. He nodded and said, "The sect does let the light of clan devour the power of lifelines, but we only use those who have committed crimes in the sect as punishment. Don't you think it's too cruel to have one's lifeline devoured as a punishment?" Nie Tian frowned and asked cold. Most of the people in the Fengtian sect were fate chart martial artists. The importance of lifelines to them was self-evident. Devouring their lifelines was almost equivalent to destroying their martial arts path, and the psychological impact on them would inevitably be on the level of collapse. The light of clan symbolizes the future of the sect, so it must always be active. This can't be helped. Guling Wuji understood why Nie Tian was so angry, but he could only shake his head helplessly. "Is that so?" Nie Tianling laughed and said in a deep voice, "If the light of clan has to devour a martial artist's lifeline, then I don't need such a symbol. Nie Tian, please be mindful of your status, and be careful with your words." Guling Wuji frowned when he heard Nie Tian's words, and his expression instantly turned gloomy. Fat Cat saw that the atmosphere between the two of them wasn't right, and quickly said, "Nie Tian, let's talk about the important things." Nie Tian's gaze darkened, and he took a deep breath before saying directly, "I want to take back the 10th lifeline from the Light of Clan." "Sir Beacon Emperor, what do you mean by that?" Guling Wuji's expression darkened again, and his tone turned cold. Nie Tian glanced at Guling Wuji and was about to say something, but Fat Cat beat him to it and briefly explained Nie Fan's situation. "Senior Guling, please think of a way to save Fan." As soon as Fat Cat's voice fell, Mo Rushi also spoke up. Guling Wuji frowned and glanced at Nie Tian and suddenly fell into deep thought. He didn't expect that Nie Tian would be faced with such a situation. It seemed that Nie Tian wanted to take back the 10th lifeline not because he wanted to break ties with the Fengtian sect, but because of his son. However, the Light of Clan had always devoured lifelines, and no one had ever been able to take back a lifeline from the Light of Clan. This matter was really difficult to deal with. However, based on the current situation, if he couldn't take back the 10th lifeline, Nie Tian, the Beacon Emperor, would probably have to leave the Fengtian sect. Is there a way? Seeing that Guling Wuji didn't speak for a long time, Nie Tian couldn't help but ask. Guling Wuji's expression softened, but he eventually shook his head. The Light of Clan was too important to the Fengtian sect, and he really couldn't take the risk. Nie Tian's face was full of disappointment, and he didn't speak for a long time. Just now, Master Chinchilla said that the body of 10,000 calamities comes from the power of the ancient holy venerables. Perhaps other than the 10th lifeline, there's another way to restrain the power of the body of 10,000 calamities. However, after a while, Guling Wuji suddenly looked at Nie Tian and said with some uncertainty, "What way?" Nie Tian's eyes trembled violently, like a drowning man grabbing onto a life-saving straw. Since the body of 10,000 calamities comes from the bloodline power of the ancient holy venerables, is it possible that the bloodline power of another ancient holy venerables can restrain this power? Guling Wuji's eyes narrowed, and he expressed his thoughts. The bloodline power of another ancient holy venerables? Nie Tian's expression suddenly changed, and he couldn't react for a moment. That might be a way. Fat Cat reacted quickly, but then she frowned and murmured, "But where does the bloodline power of another ancient holy venerables come from?" Chapter 4567. Fat Cat understood what Guling Wuji meant, but he was puzzled. Where did the bloodline power of the other ancient saint venerable come from? The body of infinite calamity was essentially the bloodline power of the ancient saint venerable. If there was another bloodline power from the ancient saint venerable, it could restrain the human tribulation power of the body of infinite calamity. However, how could the bloodline power of the ancient saint venerable be obtained so easily? The Fengtian sect is where the ancient saint venerable died. The power of the ancient saint venerable is scattered throughout the entire Fengtian mountain range. Guling Wuji glanced at Fat Cat, but he was interrupted by the latter before he could finish. You mean the bloodline power of the ancient Saint Venerable is in the Fengtian sect? Fat Cat was quick-witted. How could he not understand what Guling Wuji was implying? Yes, Guling Wuji's expression was a little unnatural, but he still nodded and admitted it. Where is it? Although Nyetian did not quite understand what Guling Wuji meant, he was still very excited and stepped forward to ask. I don't know either. Guling Wuji shook his head, which surprised Nyetian. Since you were the one who suggested it, how could you not know where it is? After the ancient Saint Venerable died, all the power of the martial body was integrated into the Fengtian mountain range through the formation. Of course, Guling Wuji knew what Nyetian was thinking. He could only explain helplessly, but no one knows exactly where each part of the power is. You are also a divine array master, so you should have some understanding of the Fengtian mountain range formation. Based on your deduction, where should the bloodline power be integrated? Fat Cat frowned and asked directly. This. Guling Wuji's face suddenly stiffened and he hesitated. He did not know where the bloodline power was. If he had to say it, it was only a guess. However, this matter was related to the life and death of Nyetian's son. It was not a child's play, so he could not say it easily. Sect Master Guling, you don't have to worry too much at this time. Just tell me your guess. Of course, Nyetian knew what Guling Wuji was hesitating about and said directly. Guling Wuji glanced at Nyetian and finally nodded. I speculate that the power of the bloodline is very likely to be in the underground beacon vein. Underground beacon vein. Nyetian's eyes couldn't help but tremble when he heard those words. Wasn't that the place where Devil's Knight and Lung Shuang Wuchen went? That's right. Guling Wuji nodded slightly and said, the power of the bloodline is born from a martial artist's martial body. Naturally, it should be hidden in the deepest part. The underground beacon vein was where the foundation of the sky beacon formation was located. It was also the core of the entire formation. The bloodline power should be there. Then I'll make a trip to the underground beacon vein. Nyetian didn't care too much and immediately set off for the underground beacon. However, just as he took 2 steps forward, his body swayed and he was unable to stand. Nyetian. Mo Rushi hurriedly went forward to support Nyetian and let him sit down to rest. Nyetian, your life meridian has yet to recover and your body is too weak. Guling Wuji looked at Nyetian and said, let's go to the underground beacon vein after you've recovered. No, I can't wait any longer. Nyetian, however, sprang to his feet, a determined look on his face. How could he rest in peace when his son's life was at stake? Nyetian, I understand how you feel, but it's useless for you to be anxious now. Guling Wuji frowned and said in a deep voice, in your current state, going to the underground beacon vein is suicide. Suicide is better than lying here and doing nothing. Nyetian, however, had already made up his mind. Guling Wuji was so angry that his face turned red and he couldn't speak. Previously, he thought that Nyetian was a near-perfect genius martial artist. Whether it was talent or temperament, he was top-notch. Why was he so abnormal today and repeatedly making unbearable actions? In fact, this was not surprising. After all, it was related to his son's life and death. No father could remain calm. Nyetian, the child should be able to hold on for a while. You are indeed too weak now. Even if you force yourself to go to the underground beacon vein, it is impossible to find the bloodline power of the ancient Holy Venerate. At this time, Fat Cat said, in my opinion, it's better to wait for you to recover a little before making any plans. After that, Fat Cat looked at Mo Rushi. Mo Rushi naturally understood and said, yes, Nyetian, Master Chinchilla is right. You should rest well. When you're better, we'll set off together. Nyetian's face was gloomy and his eyes were trembling slightly. Like a trapped beast, his body exuded a frightening cold aura. After a long time, Nyetian finally nodded and agreed to Fat Cat's proposal. Well, we'll go to the underground beacon vein in half a month. Seeing Nyetian nodding, Guling Wuji forced a smile and said, 3 days. However, as soon as he finished speaking, Niet Tian stood up again and said in an unquestionable tone, in 3 days I will go to the underground beacon vein. 3 days? Guling Wuji was stunned. In his opinion, 3 days would not make any difference to Niet Tian now. If Niet Tian still had the 10th lifeline, he might be able to recover in 3 days. Now that the 10th lifeline was gone and the other 9 lifelines were severely damaged, his recovery ability was greatly reduced. How much could he recover in 3 days? Then 3 days. However, at this time, Fat Cat also spoke and agreed with Niet Tian's words with a helpless expression. He knew that Niet Fan could not hold on for much longer. Perhaps 1 month was his limit. If they went to the underground beacon vein in half a month, Niet Fan would be long dead by the time Niet Tian and the others returned. Guling Wuji looked at Fat Cat. Although he wanted to stop him, he could not speak for a long time. 3 days were very torturous, but fortunately, it was over. 3 days later, outside a cave in the depths of the 9 extreme peaks, Niet Tian and the others appeared. Niet Tian, there are still many things to deal with in the Feng Tian sect. I can't accompany you to the underground beacon vein. Let Brother Qingqi accompany you this time. Guling Wuji looked at Niet Tian and nodded. He thought about the trip to the underground beacon vein for a long time and decided not to go in the end. On one hand, the Feng Tian sect did have many things to deal with, and someone must stay behind to take charge. On the other hand, after the incident at the clan light, there was obviously a gap between Guling Wuji and Niet Tian. It was inevitable that the atmosphere would be strange if they went together. Compared to Guling Wuji, Qingqi was obviously more suitable to accompany them. Moreover, his attainment in formations was also higher than Guling Wuji. Yes, Niet Tian nodded and did not say much. Brother Qingqi, I have told you everything I know about the heavenly beacon formation and the underground beacon vein. After you enter, be careful and don't touch anything under the beacon vein. Guling Wuji turned to look at Qingqi and said, also, if it is convenient for you, please help pay attention to the beacon's emperor and sect leader Lung. Guling, don't worry. I am here. Qingqi already knew what happened and naturally understood the importance of this trip to the beacon vein. Although he was not sure, he still smiled and nodded with a confident look. Chapter 4568. Guling Wuji looked at Qingqi and smiled faintly, not saying anything more. Niet Tian and the rest didn't waste any more time and directly entered the cave. I hope everything goes smoothly. Guling Wuji sighed softly as he stared at the back of Niet Tian and the rest. Inside the cave, Niet Tian, Qingqi, and Mo Rushi slowly walked forward. Originally, Tang 13 and the rest wanted to tag along, but were rejected by Niet Tian. Niet Tian was completely unprepared for this trip to the underground beacon vein. It wouldn't be good if there were too many people. In fact, Niet Tian only wanted Qingqi to tag along, but he couldn't persuade Mo Rushi, so he could only let the latter tag along. The cave was long and narrow, damp and cold, making one feel extremely uncomfortable. After walking for a few thousand meters, Niet Tian and the rest finally saw a wider cave, following which the 3 of them walked for another few hundred meters before a cave entrance with a radius of only a few meters appeared in front of them. This should be the entrance to the underground beacon vein. Qingqi looked around and nodded his head. I'll go down first, you guys follow behind. Without saying a word, Niet Tian took a step forward and jumped into the cave. Qingqi frowned, feeling that Niet Tian was obviously a little anxious, no longer as calm as before. Miss Mo, follow me, I'll bring up the rear. Qingqi nodded to Mo Rushi, signaling her to go first. Mo Rushi agreed and immediately leaped into the cave, followed by Qingqi. Inside the cave, Niet Tian slightly activated his astral soul wings, stabilized his body, and slowly descended. The surroundings were pitch black, and there seemed to be a mysterious force in the air that interfered with Niet Tian's perception, making it impossible for him to figure out how deep it was. Mo Rushi's figure arrived, following closely behind Niet Tian. She seemed a little nervous and didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Niet Tian, There's an array in this cave that can weaken one's five senses. We have to be careful. Qing Chi also arrived, reminding Nie Tian in a low voice. Nie Tian nodded and replied, but he increased his speed, diving deeper. Mo Rushi followed closely behind. Qing Chi did not dare to be careless and remained vigilant. The three of them didn't know how long they had been sinking, but they couldn't find the bottom of the cave. They couldn't help but feel a little strange. How could this cave be so deep? It is like a bottomless abyss. Qing Chi felt that the aura of the formation in the surrounding space seemed to have become much denser. It actually compressed his perception to a range of 10 meters. Nie Tian noticed this. Although he was very anxious, he still slowed down. Be careful. At this moment, Mo Rushi suddenly exclaimed as she sensed something. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed as he instinctively activated the astral soul shield, instantly enveloping the three of them. Bang! In the next instant, Nie Tian felt as though he had collided into something. A muffled sound rang out as his astral soul shield almost shattered. After that, his speed slowed down significantly. Following that, Nie Tian saw that his surroundings were much brighter. His surroundings were actually crimson, as if he was surrounded by flames. However, the flames did not seem to be ordinary. They seemed to be surging like an undercurrent. It's the underground lava layer. Qing Chi immediately reacted. His expression changed abruptly as he was extremely shocked. Since they had entered the underground lava layer, they had sunk at least hundreds of thousands of meters. He never thought that this cave would be so deep. Could it be that this was a passage to the Earth's core? Nie Tian maintained the astral soul shield. Although there was lava all around, the heat still seeped in. Soon, the three of them were drenched in sweat. Why is the temperature of the lava so high? Qing Chi frowned, a little puzzled. An ordinary lava layer would only have a temperature of a few thousand to 10,000 degrees, but the lava layer here was so hot that they almost couldn't breathe. A conservative estimate of the temperature was at least a few 100,000 degrees. Nie Tian didn't care too much about it. He continued to strengthen the astral soul shield with his astral soul shield. But soon, he discovered that the temperature of the lava layer was getting higher and higher. The heat kept seeping in, and the three of them felt like they were in a furnace. No, the lava layer definitely can't have such a high temperature. Qing Chi shook his head while observing the surroundings, completely ignoring the sweat on his back. Did you guys notice that our speed is increasing? It's like there's some force pulling us down. At this time, Mo Rushi spoke, a little puzzled. Nie Tian frowned and nodded. He also had the same feeling. I got it. Suddenly, Qing Chi seemed to have discovered something and shouted. Then, his expression changed as he hurriedly shouted, Nie Tian, stop, stop. Nie Tian was taken aback for a moment, not quite understanding what Qing Chi meant, but he still slowed down and prepared to stabilize himself. As soon as he stabilized himself, Nie Tian's expression changed. He was horrified to find that even under his control, he still couldn't stop the speed of their descent. There was no doubt that there was a huge suction force below that was pulling Nie Tian and the other two. Nie Tian, go to the side. Qing Chi seemed to have expected that Nie Tian would encounter such a situation and hurriedly pointed to the side and shouted. Nie Tian responded and directly covered the astral soul shield with his astral soul wings, flapping them vigorously and rushing to the side. In this way, Nie Tian and the others no longer sank straight down, but sank diagonally. However, the strange suction force became stronger at this time. Although the power of Nie Tian's wings was very strong, they still drew an arc in the lava layer. After a moment, Nie Tian suddenly felt that the direction of the suction force began to change. First, it was below him, then parallel to him, and finally above him. Nie Tian was puzzled, feeling as if he was circling around a spherical object. After another moment, Nie Tian felt that the suction above seemed to have weakened a little, and the temperature of the surrounding lava layer began to drop. He immediately flapped his wings and tried to explore downward. Bang! Soon, Nie Tian heard a cracking sound, and then the lava around him disappeared, and he actually came to a void. Nye Tian stabilized his body, and the astral soul shield and astral soul wings were withdrawn at the same time, and then he retreated a few thousand meters. Only then did he see clearly that there was a huge fireball that was tens of thousands of meters above him, and the flames soared into the sky and spread in all directions like a scorching sun. So we didn't enter the lava layer, but this fireball. Nye Tian became cold, and he couldn't help but feel a lingering fear. They drew an arc in the fireball, and if they passed through the center of the fireball, they would most likely be directly burned by the blazing flames in the heart of the fireball. This fireball should be this world's sunstar. Qing Chi's face was filled with joy after surviving a disaster, and he looked down and said, Nye Tian was stunned for a moment, and then he looked down, and the scene that entered his eyes caused him to be stunned for a moment. Below them was an expanse of verdant vegetation. Trees stood like trees in a forest, and mountain ranges stretched on continuously. It was overflowing with vitality, and it was a scene of prosperity. It seemed that they didn't come to the underground, but entered a whole new world. Chapter 45-69. Nye Tian and the other two were equally shocked as they looked down in disbelief. How was this the underground world? It was more like they had traveled through time and space and arrived in a brand new world. After a while, Nye Tian calmed down, but his expression was not good. He even wondered if they had come to the wrong place. This was not the underground beacon vein at all. Could it be that this fireball is a space-time tunnel? Nye Tian couldn't help but look at the huge fireball in the sky and wondered. Although everything here is different from what we imagined, I am very sure that we have not come to the wrong place. Qing Chi looked at Nye Tian and seemed to know what the latter was thinking. He smiled faintly and said, Mo Rushi's mouth twitched as she murmured, We clearly came through the underground. How can this be? Qing Chi's eyes narrowed, and he laughed dryly. No one really knows what the underground world is like. I once read about the hypothesis of the underground world in an ancient book. The book said that our underground world is not solid but hollow. There is another world under the ground that is very similar to our world. I always thought that it was a lunatic's dream, but now it seems that person has also come to a world similar to the one we are in now. Let's go down and take a look first. Nye Tian didn't care about the hypothesis of the underground world. He only knew that since they were already here, they should first understand the world in front of them. They didn't have much time. They must find the bloodline power left by the ancient Holy Venerate as soon as possible. The three of them landed outside a forest. The surroundings were overgrown with vegetation and rugged rocks. It was no different from the mountains and forests of the Holy World. The three of them quickly found a mountain path. It was winding and quiet, like an immortal guiding the way, leading to the end of a strange peak. Nye Tian gazed at the mountain peak, which looked like a sharp sword that had been stabbed into the mountain range. Let's go take a look at this strange peak first. The corner of Nye Tian's mouth twitched slightly as he said lightly, This mountain range stretched on endlessly, and this strange peak stood out like a crane among chickens. If there was any treasure here, it must be in this strange peak. Qing Chi nodded in agreement. The three of them walked along the path and soon arrived at the mountainside. At this time, the sound of a mountain song could be heard. It was distant and indistinct, as if it came from the horizon. Nye Tian's eyes trembled. He turned around and saw a green-robed old man and a 17 or 18-year-old girl walking slowly from the other side of the mountain path. I finally see someone. Qing Chi seemed a little happy. He immediately stepped forward and greeted them enthusiastically. Hello, old brothers. Elder Qing Chi laughed heartily, but walked over at a leisurely pace. He first sized up Nye Tian and the others, then said with a chuckle, Judging from your attire, you shouldn't be from Foaming Mountain, right? We're from out of town. Qing Chi nodded and smiled. He then pointed at the mountain peak in the distance and asked, Big brother, let me ask you, is there anyone on this mountain peak? Of course there are people. The old man smiled and said, This is Lei Yun Peak. There's a cultivation sect, the Fengtian sect at the top of the mountain. It is the largest force in our Foaming Mountain and is in charge of everything in Foaming Mountain. As he spoke, the old man's gaze once again swept across Nietian and the other two, and asked, "Are you guys going to the Fengtian sect?" Fengtian sect. Nietian and Qing Chi were stunned at the same time, and then looked at each other in disbelief. "Big brother, are you sure the sect on Leiyan Peak is called the Fengtian sect?" Qing Chi frowned and asked with a serious expression. Nietian was the beacon emperor of the Fengtian sect, but there was actually a Fengtian sect here. How could they not be surprised? "Of course I'm sure." The green-robed old man smiled and said, "The Fengtian sect is in charge of everything in Fengming Mountain. Everyone in Fengming Mountain believes in the Fengtian Immortal." Fengtian Immortal? Nietian could not help but be taken aback, and could not help but ask, "Is he the sect leader of the Fengtian sect?" The azure-robed old man glanced at Nietian, nodded, and said, "Young man, you're not from here, so you can't casually call him Venerable Fengtian. You must respectfully call him Venerable Fengtian." "Oh." Nietian nodded, but he couldn't help but mutter in his heart. This Fengtian Immortal was a little too high and mighty. The Fengtian Immortal was not enough. He had to call the Lord Immortal. However, Nietian was even more curious. What was so mysterious about the Fengtian sect, whose sect leader was called the Immortal Lord? The Fengtian sect here was not a martial arts sect, but a cultivation sect. It was really strange. Immortals were not popular in the world of martial arts. Even those experts who had reached the peak of martial arts cultivation would not call themselves immortals. It was rumored that immortals were a group of experts who were born at the beginning of the world. Their martial bodies were different from ordinary people, and they did not cultivate martial arts, but another set of systems, the immortal Tao. The Fengtian sect called itself an immortal cultivation sect. Could it be that the people of the sect did not cultivate martial arts, but the immortal Tao? "Thank you for reminding me, old brother. We are here to visit the Fengtian sect." Qing Chi also had many questions in his heart. He nodded and smiled. He did not want to waste any more time and was ready to immediately go to the Fengtian sect to see what was going on. "Visit." The green-robed old man smiled, stroked his beard, and said, "Since you are here to visit, do you have an invitation?" "An invitation?" Qing Chi was stunned for a moment, then shook his head and smiled bitterly. "No, you are from outside, and you do not have an invitation, so it is impossible for you to enter the Fengtian sect." The green-robed old man shook his head and said with a smile, "The Fengtian sect is not a place that anyone can visit, not to mention people like you who are from outside. Even the city lords of Fengming Mountain who want to visit must send an invitation several months in advance. Only after receiving an invitation can they officially visit. So that's how it is." Qing Chi's face was bitter. He did not expect things to be so troublesome. From the old man's reaction, it could be seen that the people here respected the Fengtian sect very much, almost to the point of worshipping it as a god. It was likely that in their eyes, the people of the Fengtian sect were all immortals. "You do not have an invitation, so you cannot visit the Fengtian sect." The old man smiled and said, "How about this? You follow me back to our village first and settle down temporarily. I will send an invitation on your behalf, and when the invitation comes, you can visit." Qing Chi could see that the green-robed old man was very sincere, but he frowned again and again. "Thank you, old mister, for your kindness, but our time is limited. We really cannot delay, so we will take our leave now." Without waiting for Qing Chi to speak, Nietian took a step forward and said directly. After saying that, Nietian turned around and walked in the direction of the Fengtian sect. "Goodbye." Qing Chi laughed dryly, cupped his hands towards the old man, and bid farewell. It's another bunch of idiots seeking to become immortals. The green-robed old man did not stop them. Looking at the figures of Nietian and the others walking further and further away, he shook his head with a smile and muttered, "Unfortunately, you are too reckless. You want to enter the Fengtian sect without an invitation. I'll be back here tomorrow. Let's meet again then." After saying that, he left with the little girl behind him. Chapter 4570. Nietian and the other two bid farewell to the elder in green and rushed to Thundercloud Peak along the dangerous mountain path. It was already evening when they arrived at the foot of Thundercloud Peak. The huge fireball high up in the sky did not move, but for some reason, its light dimmed as if it was about to set. Soon, Nietian and the others arrived at the entrance of the Fengtian sect. Beside the narrow mountain path, a 10-meter-high boulder stood, engraved with 3 majestic characters. Fengtian sect. This sect is really called the Fengtian sect. Nietian frowned. Although he was prepared, he was still a little surprised. The Fengtian sect of immortal cultivation is really interesting. Qingqi could not help but smile. Looking at the stone steps in front of him, he could not help but look forward to it. He really wanted to see what this Fengtian sect of immortal cultivation looked like. Seeing that there were no guards around, Nietian did not hesitate and directly took a step forward. But the next moment, a strange scene happened. Before Nietian's foot landed, he felt a powerful force rushing towards him. The rolling momentum made it impossible for him to avoid it, so he could only stand up and take it head-on. Bang! Then, with a muffled sound, Nietian seemed to hit something. His body shook violently, and he took a few steps back. He fell down a few steps and almost fell. Nietian steadied his body and frowned. He looked in front of him with a puzzled face, but he did not see anything. It seemed that there was an invisible wall in front of him. Not only was it invisible, but there was also no aura at all. What's going on? Qingqi was also stunned and looked in front of him in disbelief. He had already sensed that there was no formation or restriction around, but the invisible door in front of him was real. What was going on? Nietian frowned and took a deep breath. He tried to sense the surrounding space, but he did not find anything unusual. He could not help but become gloomy. Nietian, why don't you try again? Qingqi also didn't notice anything unusual. He turned around and said to Nietian. Nietian nodded. Activating his astral soul shield, he slowly walked forward, approaching the entrance step by step. And when his astral soul shield came into contact with the formless gate, a strange scene occurred. The portion of the astral soul shield that entered the formless gate actually didn't suffer any obstruction. Instead, it disappeared as though it had sunk into water. Nietian was puzzled, but he did not stop and continued forward. When he got out of the invisible door, he felt a powerful force coming at him, forcing him to retreat. What's going on? Qingqi frowned and stepped forward to investigate, but he did not sense any energy fluctuations. He was one of the top saint formation masters in the All-Heaven Saints world, yet he was unable to sense the strange, invisible door at all. It was far too strange. All of you back off. Nietian frowned and suddenly waved his hand, signaling Qingqi and Mo Rushi to step back. Qingqi knew that Nietian wanted to force his way through, so he hesitated for a moment but still retreated to the side. Mo Rushi also retreated, looking at Nietian from afar with a worried expression. Boom! Nietian took a deep breath and directly attacked with the sky sword. Sword intent surged, and he slashed out furiously. The sword's shadow was like a mountain, pressing down on the invisible door. But what was shocking was that when the sword's shadow fell, it was like a clay ox falling into the sea, as though it was swallowed by the invisible door. Nietian's expression changed, and he couldn't help but feel a little angry. He slashed out 3 more times, but the situation was still the same. Nietian's expression turned ugly in shock. He had seen formations and restrictions with the devouring attribute before, but he had never seen one as strange as the invisible door in front of him. Although he couldn't sense anything from the invisible door, he had a feeling that the invisible door was like a bottomless abyss that could absorb all energy. Not to mention the current him. Even when his cultivation had reached the 9th level of the Heaven Martial Realm after the blood sacrifice, he might not be able to shake the invisible door. Could this be an immortal formation? Qingqi frowned, and his old face was a little embarrassed. He followed Nietian to deal with the current situation, but he didn't expect that he would be helpless in the face of a door. It should be some kind of formation, but the formation source shouldn't be here. At this moment, Fat Cat suddenly appeared, looking curiously at the empty invisible door, and murmured, "The formation source isn't here?" Qing Chi was taken aback, and he asked doubtfully, if that's the case, how did the power of the formation get here? He had set up formations for hundreds of thousands of years, but he had never heard of a formation that separated the power and the formation source. I don't know either. Fat Cat shook his head, looked at Nietian helplessly, and said with a bitter smile, it seems that we can only go back to find that old man. Wait for him to apply for a visit? Nietian frowned, of course. He knew that the old man Fat Cat mentioned was the green-clothed old man they met during the day. Yes. Fat Cat nodded, and then disappeared. Nietian looked at the invisible door in front of him, hesitated for a long time, and finally chose to listen to Fat Cat's suggestion. If they waited for the green-clothed old man to apply for a visit, even if everything went smoothly, it would take several months, and it would definitely be too late. Nietian wanted to find the green-clothed old man and find out more about the Fengtian sect from him. The three no longer hesitated and immediately went down the mountain. They soon arrived at the place where they met the green-clothed old man during the day and decided to wait where they were. The night was long and torturous. Nietian found that the position of the huge fireball in the sky had not changed, but the light and flames were changing according to a cycle, extinguishing the night and illuminating the day. When the huge fireball faintly glowed, the sky also began to slowly brighten. Not long after, the green-clothed old man's figure appeared again. You've returned earlier than this old man expected. The green-clothed old man walked over with a chuckle, without the slightest bit of hesitation. He already knew that Nietian and the others would return. Old brother must be joking. Qing Chi smiled awkwardly. The Fengtian sect's mountain gate is too tight. We can't get in. The Fengtian sect's mountain gate formation was set up by the first Fengtian immortal. No one in the entire immortal Qi continent can break it. The green-clothed old man laughed, waving his hand. Come with me. Nietian and Qing Chi looked at each other, then followed the green-clothed old man. Along the way, Nietian learned that the green-clothed old man's name was Yu Sanjing, and he lived in a small mountain village nearby, Gayu Village, and was the village chief. Everyone in my village calls me Yugong. You guys can follow suit. Yu Sanjing smiled as he pointed to a quiet village with smoke curling up from chimneys. Look, that's our Gaoyu village. Nietian gazed at the peaceful little village and couldn't help but feel a strong yearning in his heart. Perhaps, deep down, he also hoped to live an ordinary life with Mo Rushi. Let's go. Yu Sanjing smiled faintly, saying as he walked, not long ago, a few strangers came here. Come to think of it, there was a young man among them who looked a bit like Brother Nietian. Devil's Night. Nietian's eyes trembled when he heard Yu Sanjing's words, and he blurted out the name. Chapter 4571. Upon hearing Yu Sanjing's words, Nietian's first reaction was to think of Devil's Night, so he blurted out, that young man who looks similar to you seems to be called Night or something. Yu Sanjing turned to look at Nietian and couldn't help but frown when he saw the latter's surprised expression. You two know each other? We're friends. Nietian nodded and asked, is there another person called Lung Shuang Wuchen by Devil's Night's side? Yes. Yu Sanjing nodded and said, Devil's Night seems to have addressed that person as Sectmaster or something. They stayed here for a day before leaving and haven't been seen since. It really is them. Nietian's eyes narrowed slightly. He was very sure that Yu Sanjing was talking about Devil's Night, Lung Shuang Wuchen, and the others. It seemed that Devil's Night, Lung Shuang Wuchen, and the others had encountered the same situation as them. Otherwise, they wouldn't have gone to Gaoyu Village. Devil's Night and the others only stayed in Gaoyu Village for a day, so they probably didn't have the patience to wait for a visit. However, he didn't know what happened to Devil's Night and the others since there was no news of them until now. Nietian, if you're friends with Devil's Night, then you have to be careful. At this time, the group arrived at the entrance of Gaoyu Village. Yu Sanjing smiled and looked at Nietian. Although Devil's Night only stayed here for a day, he has offended many people. Sir Yu, what's going on? Nietian couldn't help but ask with a frown. Yu Sanjing shook his head and smiled bitterly. Devil's Night was disrespectful to the Fengtian immortal and angered many young people in the village. He even fought with some of them. Nietion's eyes narrowed. So that's what happened. Devil's Knight had always been arrogant, and he relied on his identity as the Beacon Emperor. It would be difficult for him to address himself as Lord Immortal Venerable. Moreover, the people here revered the Fontion Immortal as if he were a god, so it was normal for there to be friction. Nietion reckoned that Devil's Knight must have taught those people a harsh lesson. If you meet those youngsters who fought with Devil's Knight, it's best if you don't speak too much. Yu Sanjing looked at Nietion, very worried that what had happened to Devil's Knight would repeat itself on Nietion. Yes. Nietion nodded and did not say anything else. After entering the village, Nietion arrived at Yu Sanjing's house. "Father, you're back." The one who came out to welcome them was Yu Sanjing's son. As if he already knew what Yu Sanjing was going to do, he wasn't surprised at the arrival of Nietion and the others. "This is my son, Yu Chao." Yu Sanjing nodded and introduced enthusiastically. "Please take a seat in the house." Yu Chao welcomed Nietion and the others into the house, looking very happy. Nietion looked around. It was a clean and spacious courtyard house, decorated simply and clean, a typical village house. "Looks like they're all ordinary people," Nietion thought to himself as he randomly found a stool and sat down. He had been observing in the dark, but did not sense any energy fluctuations from Yu Sanjing and Yu Chao. He guessed that the people of this world did not practice martial arts. Of course, those so-called immortal cultivators were excluded. "Grandfather." At this moment, a clear voice sounded, and a delicate figure walked into the house. It was the young girl who followed Yu Sanjing yesterday. The young girl was about 17 or 18 years old. Her facial features were not exquisite, but they were regular, giving off a very pure feeling. "This is my granddaughter, Yulua," Yu Sanjing introduced as he gestured for Yulu to sit down. Yulu sat beside Yu Sanjing, looking at Nietion and the others curiously, as if she had seen something rare. Nietion furrowed his brows, feeling a little uneasy. Although Yu Sanjing's family was very hospitable, he felt that there was more to it than meets the eye, especially Yu Chao and Yu Lu's indescribable respect towards Nietion and the others. It made him feel even more uneasy. Nietion glanced at Qing Chi. Although the latter was smiling, he could see that he was a little unnatural, as if he had sensed something. "Old brother, we're from out of town. Thank you for your warm hospitality." Qing Chi did not expose him, but smiled and said politely, "Mr. Qing Chi, you went to the Fontion sect yesterday, but you were stopped at the door, right?" Yu Sanjing smiled and said straightforwardly. Qing Chi nodded and smiled bitterly. "We couldn't break the formation of the Fontion sect's mountain gate. Fortunately, you couldn't break it. If you did, you'd be in trouble." Yu Sanjing took a sip of tea and smiled. "The Fontion sect is very strict. If you broke their mountain gate, you'd be in big trouble." Qing Chi took a glance at Nietion, but didn't say anything. "Mr. Yu, we have an important matter to visit the Fontion sect. Can you help us get an invitation?" Nietion did not stand on ceremony and asked directly. "An invitation is fine, but it'll take some time." Yu Sanjing replied with a smile. "We don't have much time. Please think of a way to get an invitation as soon as possible, Mr. Yu." Nietion was afraid that Yu Sanjing would say that, so he quickly said, I'm afraid it'll be a little difficult." Yu Sanjing had an awkward expression on his face, looking like he was at his wit's end. "You may not know the Fontion sect." Yu Chao stepped forward and was about to explain, but was interrupted by Nietion. "We know it's hard to get an invitation, but we really don't have much time." Nietion pursed his lips and glanced at Yu Chao. He did not try to hide anything and said directly, "If you can help us, we'll be very grateful. If you have any difficulties, we can help too." Saying it so bluntly was almost like they were making a deal. Ahem, ahem. Yu Sanjing could not help but cough when he heard Nietion's words. Although they hit it well, Nietion still saw through it. "Mr. Qing Chi, you're not foreigners, but people from another world, am I right?" Yu Sanjing did not hide it anymore and asked Qing Chi. "Yes." Qing Chi was stunned at first, then nodded. He did not expect Yu Sanjing to be able to see through it. Your world advocates martial arts. You're all martial artists, am I right? Yu Sanjing's eyes quivered. He looked very happy and asked cautiously. Qing Chi and Nie Tian looked at each other and nodded again. Sure enough, this old man really did have something to ask of them. It'll be easy. Yu Sanjing was even more excited when he saw Qing Chi nod. Then, he became a bit embarrassed and said, "The people of our world don't practice martial arts and don't know what it is. But we do have cultivators here, such as those from the Fengtian sect." It said that the Fengtian sect's immortal cultivation methods were passed down from a great man a long time ago. That great man came from your world and was an ancient saint venerable. Ancient saint venerable. Nie Tian and Qing Chi exclaimed at the same time when they heard the name.